In the sky, the flying beast suddenly stopped moving while everyone on it shut their mouths in unison and were shocked to the extreme. The young man that arrogantly ridiculed Xianxia lay prone on the ground now while grimacing in pain and spasming endlessly. Shockingly, the handsome young man stood before him. When they saw this scene, how could they be unable to discern that the person who threw their companion down was this young man? "Tell me where this is, and I'll spare you this time." Xianxia lowered his gaze to look at the young man on the ground and asked with an indifferent tone. "You?" The young man opened his mouth and was just about to curse furiously. But when he encountered Xianxia's eyes, he couldn't help but shudder. This pair of eyes were indifferent and calm yet filled with an aura that had disregarded life and death. It seemed like so long as someone dared to go against him, that person would suffer the wrath of the heavens. At this moment, the young man completely understood that this fellow before him wasn't an idiot that didn't know anything, but a true expert, and a person that killed without batting an eyelid, because only by experiencing the baptism of innumerable blood and battles would one be able to possess such a gaze, and an ordinary person was utterly incapable of copying it. When he thought up to here, the gaze the young man shot at Xianxia carried a wisp of dense terror, and he didn't dare hesitate and said in a respectful tone, "Young hero, this place is the region of metal in the dark Parasol's secret realm. According to my inference, there ought to be a grand Tao fragment branded with the profundities of metal hidden here, and we've come precisely for this." All his companions were astounded when they saw him be so cooperative, and their faces were covered in disbelief. Never had they imagined that after the young man suffered such humiliation, not only did he not flare up, he would actually be so obedient and simply be like an obedient child that was exceptionally meek. Dark Parasol's secret realm, region of metal. Xianxia's eyes lit up instead as he never imagined that he would actually accidentally arrive here directly. "Did all of you encounter anyone from the 9 Radiance Sword Sect when you came over?" The 9 Radiance Sword Sect? No matter if it was the young man that still lay on the ground or the others that remained on the back of the flying beast, all of their expressions revealed great shock and realization when they heard this. So it turns out that he's a disciple from one of the 10 great immortal sects, the 9 Radiance Sword Sect. No wonder, no wonder. In merely an instant, the gazes they shot at Xianxia couldn't help but carry a trace of reverence because ignoring the formidableness of Xianxia's cultivation, merely this identity made him someone they couldn't afford to offend. "Young hero, we didn't encounter any great disciples of the 9 Radiance Sword Sect all the way here." The young man took a deep breath before he spoke, and his expression was even more respectful. "Oh." Xianxia was slightly disappointed, and he asked a few more questions before letting the young man go. But through these questions, he found out that killing intent was hidden all over this region of metal, and it was extremely dangerous. Only by flying in the sky would he be a bit safer. Because if one walked on the ground, one would encounter the assault of a type of terrifying tempest of metal. This tempest was extremely strange and came out suddenly from the ground. Once one was swept by it, one would absolutely die without a doubt. The young man's group had once seen numerous cultivators being swept away by the tempest of metal due to their carelessness. Not to mention corpses, even scraps weren't left behind, and it was exceedingly horrifying. According to what that young man said, all the living beings that have entered the region of metal have come for the sake of the Grand Tao fragment. Perhaps I'll be able to inquire about the whereabouts of senior sister En and Long Jinbei after I arrive there. Xianxia pondered briefly, and then he didn't stay here any longer and soared up to transform into a flowing ray of light that flashed towards the distance. The Dark Parasol's secret realm was one of the 3 great treasure troves in the Dark Parasol's abyss, and it contained numerous grand Tao fragments. All of them were left behind by the Dark Parasol divine tree from the primeval times before it perished. According to rumor, these grand Tao fragments were formed from the laws of the Heaven Tao, and every single grand Tao fragment contained a different grand Tao profundity. If a cultivator was able to obtain one, then so long as it was refined, the cultivator would be able to grasp a grand Tao profundity to the perfection realm. This was different to a Tao Insight Origin pill. A Tao Insight Origin pill was refined by gathering numerous natural treasures of the heavens and the earth and extracting the blood essence of a heavenly immortal. Even if one consumed it, one would only be able to comprehend a type of Grand Tao profundity and learn the basics of it. If one wanted to completely grasp the Grand Tao, then one had to cultivate and accumulate comprehension over a long period. On the other hand, Grand Tao fragments only had to be completely refined before one could attain the perfection realm in the Grand Tao contained within the fragment. So its value was so great that it was absolutely not something a Tao Insight Origin pill could compare to. A Grand Tao fragment that was branded with the Grand Tao of Metal was hidden within this region of metal. Moreover, there were many more regions like this within the Dark Parasol secret realm, and it drew the experts of the various powers over to explore them. Xianxia flew for around the time for an incense stick to burn before he finally saw numerous rays of light tearing through the sky in the extreme distance while rushing even further away. There was no lack of beings from the clans of the primordial era amongst them, and it seemed to be extremely clamorous. He knew that he was finally about to approach his destination, and it was very likely that a Grand Tao fragment branded with the Grand Tao of Metal was hidden there. Merely thinking of it caused him to be extremely moved. If I'm able to obtain it, then coupled with my strength, I'll be entirely capable of exerting double my combat strength. At that time, what would I be afraid of even if I fought the other experts? After he flew forward for another 50 kilometers, the smell of blood actually started to be emanated from the path ahead. Besides that, there were also some magic treasure fragments, severed limbs and mangled corpses, and they showed that he'd entered into a dangerous area. Even Xianxia became cautious upon arriving here. Not long after, an enormous lake appeared within his field of vision. Golden lake water surged about within the lake, and it was brilliant and clear as it tainted the entire heavens and earth gold. Most horrifying of it all was the golden-colored lake actually emanated an extremely terrifying sharp aura that threw the heavens and the earth into disorder and emitted the hissing sounds of tearing. When one approached slightly, one's skin would hurt as if it was being sliced by blades, and it pierced the eyes to the point it was almost impossible to keep them open. At this moment, there were many figures standing in the surroundings of the Golden Lake. All of them were on alert and had made sufficient preparations because it seemed as if the Golden Lake contained a shocking treasure. I've wandered around this region for a long time, and only the aura of metal here is oppressive. That Grand Tao fragment is surely hidden here. Someone spoke with certainty. Humph. It isn't only you who has discerned this. Who amongst the people present hasn't? But we'll have to depend on our own strengths if we want to obtain the Grand Tao fragment. Otherwise, perhaps some accident might occur. Someone spoke gloomily. Alas, I only hope that the Grand Tao fragment appears quickly. If we continue waiting, then the people that come over will only increase. Someone frowned and was filled with anxiety. What's so difficult about that? Wouldn't we know if we find someone to go in the lake and try? The person that spoke was a young man with a handsome appearance and an arrogant expression. And there was actually a lone horn that was suffused with a crimson glow of flames growing out from his smooth forehead. This young man swept the surroundings with his gaze and just happened to see Xianxia who'd just arrived here. And he instantly set his mind at rest when he saw Xianxia was all alone. So he pointed at Xianxia right away. You! Get into the lake and check it out. Xianxia was able to discern that this young man ought to be a being from the Flameox clan, and he could be considered to be of noble birth. But Xianxia disregarded the young man and shot his gaze towards the Golden Lake instead. He was able to sense that this lake was filled with an extremely dense aura of the Grand Tao of Metal, and it was extremely shocking and simply on the verge of turning material. Being directly disregarded by Xianxia before so many people caused the face of the young man from the Flameox clan to sink instantly, and his eyes surged with the glow of flames as he roared explosively. Bastard! Did you not hear me? Why must you be so impetuous? Xianxia couldn't help but sigh as he noticed he was really unfortunate because it seemed that no matter where he went, there seemed to be someone that would wish for nothing more than to trample upon him. Could it be that it's because I keep a profile that's too low? What do you mean by that? The young man frowned, and his imposing aura grew. Nothing. I just want you to get into the lake and check it out. Xianxia spoke calmly and naturally as he gave the young man a taste of his own medicine. You're courting death. Fucking get into the pool obediently. The young man was furious. He flashed out before slapping out with his palm. and he intended to force Xianxia forward to scout out the lake. This battle was obviously impossible to avoid. To Xianxia's surprise, this young man's strength wasn't bad, and it was absolutely not something an ordinary person could deal with. Every single move of the young man erupted with surging waves of flames that were peerlessly overbearing. Obviously, it was an exceedingly formidable Dao art, and it ought to be the innate Dao art of the Flameox clan. But he was bound to lose when encountering a freak like Xianxia who possessed shocking potential. The battle didn't last for 10 moves before the young man was slapped flying. Everyone in the surroundings were exceedingly shocked in their hearts when they saw this scene. Go enter the lake and check it out. It's your fortune if you're able to live, and if you suffer a disaster, then you can only blame yourself for being unfortunate. Xianxia raised his hand and tossed the young man from the Flameox clan over. You actually dare to treat me like this? My eldest senior brother will absolutely crush you. The young man felt a mix of terror and fury, and he cried out repeatedly. His arrogance from before had transformed into terror because he never imagined that when he casually grabbed a scapegoat earlier, he would actually bite off more than he could chew. Xianxia was stunned and seemed to have recalled the Flameox clan had a formidable expert that he saw before he entered the Sea of Clouds. And this expert had led his clansmen to be the first batch that charged into the Sea of Clouds. After that, he shook his head and was completely unconcerned. This young man was only a disciple of the Flameox clan, and such threats were utterly incapable of being too much for him. If it was in terms of status, then he was a seed disciple of the 9 Radiant Sword sect, and it wasn't something that a power like the Flameox clan could compare to. Thump! The young man flew in midair. With his strength, he was actually completely capable of turning halfway and avoiding the lake. However, what caught him off guard was that as soon as he arrived in the sky above the lake, a golden vortex charged up and directly swept him into the lake, and it shocked him to the point of crying out loudly before vanishing instantly. That's... my God! Could it be that there's a ferocious beast beneath the lake? It actually instantly swallowed an expert from the Flameox clan. It's simply even more terrifying than the tempests of metal. After the people in the surroundings of the lake saw this sudden and bloody scene, all of them couldn't help but gasp and cried out involuntarily with shock. Rumble! However, in the next moment, the sound of boiling that was like the rumbling of thunder resounded out from the bottom of the lake, and it shook the heavens and the earth while stirring the entire golden lake to the point of roiling violently. It seemed as if something shocking was about to emerge, and the commotion it made was extremely great to the point that even the voices of everyone was completely covered by it. The golden lake roiled as waves surged, and it was like an ancient ferocious beast had awoken from its deep slumber. It emitted an extremely violent and terrifying sharp aura that threw this expanse of the heavens and the earth into disorder. Everyone was astounded and were shocked by this terrifying aura to the point of retreating repeatedly because this imposing aura was too horrifying, and once they were to be affected by it, the consequences would be unimaginable. Swish! Under the attentive and shocked gazes of everyone present, the golden lake suddenly started to condense and shrink rapidly, and in the time of a few breaths, it actually transformed into an extremely blazing and dazzling leaf. The leaf was large like a millstone and completely golden, and it was branded with dense, complicated, and extremely profound veins and striations. It floated in midair like a blazing sun in the sky, and it emitted an extremely surging aura of the Grand Tao of Metal. Most astounding of it all was the aura of the Grand Tao of Metal sprinkled down like a rain of light, and it transformed into numerous small golden figures that fluttered about, danced about, and leaped about around the leaf. A Grand Tao fragment! Someone exclaimed in shock while his breathing became heavy, and even his eyes had turned red. It was as if he'd seen a peerless beauty lightly removing her silk robe to reveal her flawless body that was capable of causing countless people to drool. The emergence of the Dark Parasol's abyss this time had drawn over countless experts from all over, and practically 99% of them had come for the sake of the Grand Tao fragments within the Dark Parasol secret realm. If they were able to obtain one of the fragments, then it would undoubtedly be like obtaining a great fortune, and it was sufficient to allow anyone to experience an explosive increase in strength within a short period of time, allowing one to soar into the sky with a single leap and shock the world with a single brilliant feat. Now a precious treasure of the heavens and the earth like this had emerged into the world, and it instantly shocked everyone present and drew countless burning and covetous gazes. She was naturally moved to the extreme. With his comprehension ability that could be considered to be monstrous, he'd only mastered the grand Tao of metal to the advanced realm, and if he wanted to improve, he could only rely on accumulating comprehension over a long period of time. After all, the profundities of a grand Tao can't be compared to by a minor Tao, and it was truly too difficult to comprehend it to the perfection realm. Ordinary cultivators were probably unable to attain such a level in their entire lives. It was precisely because of this reason that so many experts would be drawn over by the emergence of the dark parasol's abyss. So she would absolutely not let such a fortuitous encounter that was bestowed by the heavens slip by. Charge! Finally, someone was unable to restrain himself any longer, and he charged towards the grand Tao fragment. Presently, there were still few people that had arrived here, and they were only around 100 in number. This opportunity was difficult to come by because once more people were to arrive, this place would surely be in great chaos, and the competition would become fairly horrifying. Everyone understood this, so in the next moment, almost everyone present strove to be the first as they charged over while emitting whistling sounds and covered in various protective magic treasures. She intended to make a move as well, but he stopped his footsteps when he observed it with the eye of divine truth, because he perceived that the surroundings of the grand Tao fragment were filled with a violent and sharp aura. It was a chaotic flow formed from the grand Tao of metal, and it was extremely dangerous and seemed like the eye of a storm. Sure enough, even though those cultivators that charged over first had magic treasures protecting their bodies, they cried out with shock when they arrived before the grand Tao fragment because their magic treasures were crushed into pieces, and it caused them to have no choice but to retreat. This group of people had failed, but some were not resigned to failure, and they put their lives on their line as they charged forward. The outcome was that not only were their magic treasures destroyed, even their bodies were minced apart, causing a rain of blood to spray out as they perished on the spot. Damn it! This grand Tao fragment is actually so difficult to subdue. Could it be that this is a test as well, and only those with formidable strengths are able to obtain it? Someone cursed with a gloomy expression. For a time, everyone that charged forward had stopped moving, and they scattered to the surroundings and took their positions while thinking and discussing about a way to solve this problem. The grand Tao fragments are formed from the laws of the heaven Tao grasped by the dark parasol divine tree before it perished. If one wants to obtain it, then one either requires sufficient strength to subdue it forcefully, or to protect oneself with a formidable magic treasure and go against it ceaselessly until completely exhausting the violet chaotic flow in the surroundings of the grand Tao fragment. In next to no time they made a conclusion, and it caused all their expressions to become extremely unsightly. If their strengths were formidable, they would have made a move since a long time ago, and why would they have waited until now? As for utilizing magic treasures to go against it, that was even more dangerous. Not to mention if it would succeed, what if they suffered the surprise attack of another? Some people refused to believe it and flew forward occasionally, and they returned empty-handed in the end. The chaotic flow in the surroundings of the grand Tao fragment was too terrifying to the point even a top-grade heaven-rank magic treasure was easily destroyed by it, and even a quasi-immortal artifact suffered a certain level of damage. The fundamental reason was that this grand Tao fragment was branded with the profundities of the grand Tao of metal, whereas metal mainly indicated killing. Amongst the numerous grand Tao profundities, it was the fiercest, so its might was naturally shocking. She calmed his mind and observed for a moment before deciding to make a move, because formidable fluctuations were coming from the distance. Obviously, numerous experts were rushing over, and it would become troublesome if more people were to arrive. The emergence of a grand Tao fragment could already be called a great fortuitous encounter, and so long as it was noticed by others, no one would let it slip by easily. Swoosh! She soared into the sky and approached the grand Tao fragment. He didn't rely on the strength of his body but utilized the profound disruption divine light to deal with it. This light innately countered the 5 elements and was comparable to the 5-colored divine light of the primordial times that could be ranked in the top 10, so it possessed a shocking might. Even though this grand Tao fragment was formidable, the grand Tao of metal is contained was similarly part of the 5 elements, and it just happened to be countered by the profound disruption divine light. Crack! Space exploded inch by inch as the chaotic flow of metal within the area was torn apart, blasted apart, dispersed, and eliminated. Even though the speed was slow, it was enough to make Xianxia feel excited. At the very least, it proved the method he used was possible. That kid is actually about to approach the Grand Tao fragment. Someone noticed this scene and cried out in surprise. It's actually him, that young man that defeated the expert from the Flameox clan. Damn it! Could it be that the Grand Tao fragment is going to fall into his hands? That might not be the case. Can't we make a move after he breaks through that barrier and seize the Grand Tao fragment? As they looked at Xianxia's figure that moved forward bit by bit, the gazes of everyone present flickered without end, and they made preparations to take advantage of the situation. But someone was already unable to restrain himself, and he intended to kill Xianxia. Swish! In the next moment, a crimson-red beam of light shot out explosively and accurately towards Xianxia's head, and its speed was swift like a bolt of lightning. Moreover, it carried a terrifying penetrative force and a shocking impetus. Bang! Xianxia seemed as if he had eyes behind his back, and he didn't turn around yet, stretched out his arm to crush it with his hand, causing it to transform into tiny bits that sprayed out like a rain of lights. Interesting, you're actually able to block a strike of mine. Accompanying this voice was the appearance of an extremely robust figure. This young man's entire body was enveloped by crimson-red flames, whereas his smooth forehead had a lone horn growing from it. The horn seemed as if it was made from flames, and it emitted a terrifying energy fluctuation. There were a few people following behind him. All of them had rather good strengths, and all of them had a lone horn on their foreheads. Experts of the Flameox clan. Looks like they've come to take revenge for their clansmen. The eyes of everyone squinted as they guessed the reason for this attack. Xianxia had tossed a young man from the Flameox clan into the Golden Lake earlier, and that young man had died miserably. You're bound to die today. Since you dared to kill a member of my Flameox clan, then die. The robust young man in the lead shouted explosively as his figure shook, and then flames that shot up 30 kilometers into the sky with a bang, causing the heavens and the earth to quake. Everyone was astounded. This cultivation is at least at 4 times combat strength or above. The flames were like a tide that soared into the sky, and they carried along a monstrous wave of heat as it moved with the intention of killing Xianxia at the critical moment of him dealing with the barrier before the Grand Tao fragment. Swoosh! Xianxia didn't dodge, nor did he turn around to enter a fierce battle with this expert from the Flameox clan. Xianxia's entire body glowed as a pair of gray and hazy wings unfolded on his back, and it covered his back and blocked the surging flames. A scene that shocked everyone appeared. The surging flames hadn't even approached Xianxia when they were crushed by a terrifying energy fluctuation, and they dispersed into the surroundings. Xianxia was actually exceedingly shocked in his heart. This Flameox clan expert was extremely formidable because the surging flames contained a boundless force of incineration. Obviously, it was a formidable Tao art, and if it wasn't for him relying on the wings of disruption, he would be utterly incapable of dealing with it so easily. But this thought only flashed in his mind for an instant. In the next moment, Xianxia was already concentrated in the barrier before him, and the profound disruption divine light swept out to eliminate the barrier while he stepped forward and was almost able to touch the Grand Tao fragment. At this moment, the pressure he endured grew greater and greater, and it was extremely dense. He was at the critical moment, and so long as he destroyed the final line of defense, the Grand Tao fragment would be within reach. The wings of disruption, the ultimate technique of the Azure Phoenix clan that has been lost for a long time. The robust young man's pupils constricted as his expression changed because he recognized the divine ability Xianxia executed. Let's make a move together and seize this opportunity to annihilate this kid. The robust young man shouted explosively as he transformed into a Flameox that was coiled with a violent flaming glow, and his hooves stepped on the air as he opened his mouth and sprayed out a sea of flames that covered the heavens and the earth as it swept towards Xianxia. The other Flameox clan experts at the side attacked successively as well. For a time, the entire heavens and the earth were filled with flames, and it tainted 5,000 kilometers in the vicinity red and carried a monstrous and extremely oppressive impetus. Xianxia's gaze went cold as boundless fury arose in his heart. If he didn't resist while facing such an attack, he would surely suffer a heavy injury, whereas if he did resist, then his efforts from before would be wasted, and he'd miss the opportunity to obtain the Grand Tao fragment. Most importantly, there were numerous experts casting covetous gazes from the surroundings, and there were even more people rushing over from the distance. The situation was filled with variables. So, if he lost the opportunity before him, it would be impossible for him to find another. But right after that, he seemed to have noticed something, and a wisp of a strange expression suddenly suffused his eyes. In the next moment, he'd already made a decision and avoided the attacks that covered the heavens and the earth without the slightest hesitation before turning around and retreating. He even disregarded the Grand Tao fragment that was right before his eyes, causing him to see extremely resolute and decisive. In the eyes of everyone, Xianxia's actions were normal. If a Grand Tao fragment was lost, he could still find another, but if he lost his life, it was impossible for him to be reborn. Swoosh! In the next moment, Xianxia had already descended in the distance, and he looked over coldly in a seemingly extremely disgruntled state. Humph! I guess you're smart. I'll come take your lowly life once I obtain the Grand Tao fragment. The expert from the Flamox clan grunted coldly with disdain before instructing the others to keep a close watch on Xianxia, whereas he himself charged into the sky and towards the Grand Tao fragment. Presently, 90% of the barrier in the surroundings of the Grand Tao barrier had been eliminated by Xianxia, and the robust young man could be said to have seized a great advantage. So long as he eliminated the final line of defense of the barrier, he would be able to obtain the Grand Tao fragment easily. He worked hard for so long, yet the fruits are enjoyed by another instead. That kid is probably on the verge of going mad with rage, right? The gazes the people in the surroundings shot at Xianxia had become strange. Even though they felt it was an extreme pity for Xianxia, the minds of most of the people present were still locked onto the Grand Tao fragment, and they were waiting for the robust young man to break through the final line of defense before taking advantage of the situation. After all, it was an extremely rare and precious treasure, so even though the forces of the Flamox clan were many, they weren't afraid because how could they possibly watch idly by and let such a fortune slip by? Bang! An enormous bang that shook the heavens and the earth resounded out as the robust young man's hand swept out repeatedly and completely tore apart the final barrier, causing the Grand Tao fragment to be within easy reach. Senior brother Jiang Wei is amazing. The experts of the Flamox clan instantly erupted with cheers. However, before the robust young man, Jiang Wei, could take the Grand Tao fragment, countless experts suddenly charged out from all directions, and they tore through the sky as they charged over. Some attacked Jiang Wei while some directly charged towards the Grand Tao fragment. The scene was instantly in chaos. You're courting death. All of you are courting death. Jiang Wei was blazing with rage as he never expected that these bastards would actually aim their sights at him. But for the sake of this Grand Tao fragment, everyone present had even disregarded their lives. So they didn't care about his threats and carried fearless expressions. This caused Jiang Wei to be even more furious. His roars shook the sky as flames soared from his entire body, and he intended to kill these bastards that took advantage of the situation. Rumble! Instantly, this expanse of the world fell into chaos. Magic treasures flew about as Tao arts raged, and blazing rays of light shot out into the surroundings. Shrill cries echoed out occasionally while severed limbs and blood sprayed all over the sky, and they fought to the point the sun and the moon dimmed in comparison, and it was an extremely horrifying scene. This was the true scene of the cultivation world, brutal and bloody. For the sake of a treasure they dreamt of, every single person was able to bet their lives and slaughter madly. But when faced with this temptation, there was a small group of people that maintained their calm and stood outside the battlefield while watching coldly because they intended to reap the final reward. Xianxia was amongst them. Everyone must be careful of that kid. He seems to be all alone, but he poses a great threat to us. Someone glanced at Xianxia, and his eyeballs spun as he spoke gloomily. Obviously, he was driving a wedge between everyone and Xianxia, and even an idiot would be able to discern it. But to Xianxia's surprise, along with this person finishing what he said, the others really shot hostile gazes at him, and they seemed as if they'd taken him to be their greatest enemy. Looks like my existence is the greatest threat in their hearts. They do really look highly upon me. Xianxia rubbed his nose yet was completely unconcerned. In the battlefield, the battle was already approaching its end. The Grand Dao fragment still floated there. Yet the people that participated in the battle for it had almost perished completely. Even the Flamox clan's experts that possessed a large force only had a few people remaining, and they were bathed in blood while still in battle. At this moment, the eyes of those people in the surroundings that still hadn't moved lit up, and they held their breaths in concentration while accumulating forces, causing them to seem like wild beasts hidden in the darkness that were about to make a move. Swoosh! 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 A wave of the sound of air being torn apart could be faintly heard from extremely far away in the sky, and it was like the sound of imminent death. It caused the hearts of everyone present to constrict as they understood a large group of experts would rush over in a short moment. Everyone became anxious, and the people who were locked in battle started to fight desperately and with all their strength, whereas those who were watching coldly from the sidelines couldn't help but become restless to join the fray. The atmosphere became horrifying and strained, and it almost caused them to be unable to catch their breaths. Xianxia similarly understood that if he continued delaying, then something unexpected might occur. So he suddenly made a move in the next moment. He didn't soar into the sky nor leave the spot he stood on, and he just stretched out his hand and gestured towards the Grand Dao fragment in midair. It seemed as if he was greeting someone, and it seemed to be extremely strange and unexpected in the strained and horrifying atmosphere, causing all the people that were on guard against Chen, she since a long time ago to be unable to refrain from being stunned. What's this fellow trying to do? Some people even thought that Xianxia was trying to play some tricks and sought to draw their attention away. They'd seen this sort of little tricks numerous times as they wandered throughout the world, so how could they fall for it? All of them revealed expressions of disdain and looked at Xianxia as if they were looking at an idiot. However, in the next moment, a scene that caused all of them to be astounded appeared. The Grand Dao fragment that had always been floating on the spot in midair actually seemed as if it was summoned and transformed into a golden ray of light that flashed towards Xianxia like a bolt of lightning. Their eyeballs almost fell out, and they seemed as if they saw a ghost. Because it was too sudden, all of them only woke up from what seemed like a dream when the Grand Dao fragment fell into Xianxia's hand, and they reacted to what had happened. But when they looked at Xianxia once more, he'd already vanished a long time ago, and he seemed as if he'd evaporated into thin air. Fuck! What the fuck is going on? Someone couldn't refrain from cursing. Bastard! Give me back that Grand Dao fragment! Someone was shocked and furious as his roar shook the sky. We've been tricked. Motherfucker. We've actually been tricked. In midair, the expert of the Flamox clan, Jiang Wei, was angered to the point of almost spitting blood. He finally understood that she didn't give up on the Grand Dao fragment earlier, but had made preparations a long time ago and was waiting to draw in the net. Moreover, the reason this bastard had waited to make a move until now was because he wanted to see all of them kill each other and rely on the strength of others to strike a heavy blow to the Flamox clan. As he looked at the scarce few companions that remained by his size, Jiang Wei was angered to the point his eyes turned red and his insides almost exploded. He'd worked hard and fought for so long, yet came back empty-handed in the end, and even more than half of his companions had died. How could he accept such an outcome? Bastard! I'll surely kill you. Surely! Jiang Wei howled with anger, and he seemed like a mad ox that was on the verge of going berserk. Right, he actually dared to play a trick on all of us. We must kill this detestable bastard. The others chimed in successively. They gnashed their teeth while their eyes blazed with flames, and they simply hated Xianxia to the bone. I saw him fleeing towards that direction earlier. Someone spoke out abruptly. Chase after him. Let's pursue him together. We absolutely must not let the Grand Dao fragment fall into this kid's hands. The spirits of the others were instantly refreshed when they heard this. All of them had murderous looks on their face and transformed their sorrow into motivation as they turned into numerous streaks that pursued towards the direction Xianxia left. These people came from different powers and had even fought and killed each other, causing them to seem like mortal enemies. However, they'd actually joined forces because of Chun Shi. It was obvious from this that one's eyes would really be blinded with rage sometimes, and it would cause one to do some absurd things. Swish! These people converged together with Jiang Wei in the lead, and they pursued madly like a dark cloud formed from locusts. They formed a formidable array that seethed with killing intent, and everywhere they passed, they shocked the cultivators on their path to the point of avoiding them and being puzzled towards what had happened. Swish! In the sky, a flowing light flickered repeatedly as if it was teleporting, and it vanished in the horizon in a few breaths of time. I never imagined that the strand of the dark parasol divine tree's soul would actually be so miraculous. Even the grand Tao fragment could be drawn over by it and obediently give itself away. Chun Shi exclaimed with admiration in his heart. When he was breaking through the barrier in the surroundings of the grand Tao fragment with the wings of disruption earlier, he'd already noticed that the piece of charred wood that was rooted within his black hole world was actually able to form a slight strange fluctuation with the grand Tao fragment. It was precisely because of this fluctuation that he noticed the grand Tao fragment would charge into his embrace without the slightest hesitation with just a single thought from him. It felt as if he'd transformed into the parent of the grand Tao fragment, and it was extremely miraculous. Right, the grand Tao fragments were formed from the laws of the heaven Tao grasped by the dark parasol divine tree before it perished, and it was always a part of the dark parasol divine tree. Presently, I possess a strand of the dark parasol divine tree's soul, so I naturally have an extremely great force of attraction to this grand Tao fragment. In next to no time, Chun Shi understood the reason behind what had happened, and he was extremely excited. Because if it was like this, then he was entirely capable of relying on this ability that was different from everyone else to obtain grand Tao fragments in a more relaxed and easy way. Just think about it. Everyone else went through great troubles and experienced horrifying battles to obtain a grand Tao fragment with great difficulty, whereas he utterly didn't have to go through so much trouble. He only had to wave his hand and the grand Tao fragment would obediently comply and fall into his palm. It was simply easier than drinking cold water. So who wouldn't be excited by such a special ability? It has actually started to be refined and fused. In the next moment, Chun Shi was shocked as he noticed the shocking changes that were occurring within his black hole world. The grand Tao fragment that had the profundities of the grand Tao of metal branded on it was without shape or form, and it was something condensed from Tao insight. At the instant it fell into his hand at that moment, it bore into the black hole world within his body and attached itself onto the sapling of the dark parasol divine tree. It was like a small sun that hung on the edge of a branch, and it emitted a boundless golden glow that illuminated the entire black hole world. Moreover, at this moment, this grand Tao fragment had actually started to break down and melt like a rain of light that sprayed down onto the stars, moon, sun, mountains, rivers, plants. It completely fused into the entire black hole world. Its speed of fusing was so swift that it was simply like ice fusing into water. According to Chun Shi's knowledge, once an ordinary cultivator obtained a grand Tao fragment, the cultivator would at least require 3 to 5 days and even up to more than a year to completely refine and absorb it. It was unlike him who was actually able to completely refine and absorb it within 10 minutes. This is surely the effect of the dark parasol divine tree sapling. Chun Shi was extremely sure that only an explanation like this was reasonable. At the same time, he was able to sense as well that his grasp of the grand Tao of metal had already attained the perfection realm, and his feeling was absolutely impossible to be described with words. It was full and flawless, as if he was completely capable of turning stone into gold so long as he was willing. The benefits from attaining the perfection realm in the grand Tao of metal was far from just this. Even his black hole world had doubled in size and was covered in a brilliant golden color that was extremely dazzling. It was like a fort made from metal, and it emitted a fierce and solid aura that was majestic and brilliant, 2 times his combat strength. At this moment, a strong feeling suddenly gushed out from Chun Shi's heart, and it felt as if no matter if he executed a Tao art or divine ability, the might exerted from it would absolutely be 2 times stronger than before. This was the biggest benefit from grasping the grand Tao of metal to the perfection realm. Oh, I heard that it isn't only the region of metal in the dark parasol secret realm that possesses a grand Tao fragment hidden within it. By relying on the marvelous ability of the dark parasol sapling, I'm entirely capable of obtaining even more grand Tao fragments, and that would mean that my strength will repeatedly multiply and rise explosively. After a long time, a thought inadvertently flashed past Xianxia's mind, and then he was unable to restrain this impulse and transformed into a ray of light that left the region of metal swiftly. He intended to carry out a huge undertaking. Dark Parasol Secret Realm, Region of Flames. A group of cultivators were prepared for battle and had greedy and burning gazes. They were like a pack of ferocious wolves that had targeted their prey, and every single one of them had already made the preparations to make a move fearlessly. Before them was a pool of lava that occupied an extremely large area. The bright red lava gurgled and bubbled while dense white mist curled up from within it, and even the air warped from the extremely blazing and high temperature. This was the central area of the region of flames, and a grand Tao fragment that was branded with the profundity of fire was hidden within it. Thus it drew numerous cultivators over. Bang! Suddenly the calm pool of lava erupted and gave rise to a red-colored monstrous wave that rose 3 kilometers into the sky, and it surged with waves of heat as it tainted the entire heavens and the earth crimson red, while the temperature it emitted was difficult to endure. Some people were caught off guard because they were too close, and they were directly swept into the lava. They let out shrill and miserable cries as their bodies dried up, burned, and swiftly transformed into ash. They'd perished in the blink of an eye, and it was extremely shocking. But no one paid attention to this horrifying scene because the gazes of everyone were drawn by the enormous crimson-red leaf that slowly rose up from the lava. The lead was red like a maple leaf, and it was crystalline and translucent. Its striations were dense and profound, and it emanated a myriad of droplets of light that developed into numerous translucent little figures that danced and fluttered about. Obviously, it was a grand Tao fragment. Everyone seethed with excitement when they saw it, and their breathing became heavy while they became extremely restless. All of them charged out in the first possible moment as they were deeply afraid of being slightly slower and missing the chance to obtain the grand Tao fragment. Charge! Fuck off! My white ape clan is taking his grand Tao fragment for sure. Humph! When an extraordinary treasure descends from the sky, only the one who's fated will obtain it. Don't fucking use your identity to intimidate others. You're courting death. You actually dared to launch a surprise attack. Die! Instantly, the entire heavens and the earth fell into chaos as battles shook the heavens and fresh blood suffused the surroundings, and it was like a hell on earth. However, this battle hadn't finished when everyone seemed to have been bewitched and stopped fighting successively. Within their fields of vision, the grand Tao fragment actually transformed into a flowing ray of light and flew off as if it possessed intelligence. Someone tried to stop it, yet had his body penetrated through and died miserably on the spot. What the fuck is going on? Everyone was shocked to the point their jaws almost dropped, and they were astounded and filled with disbelief because the scene that appeared before their eyes was so strange. Fuck! It was that kid. Someone suddenly saw a handsome young man waving his hand from the distance, whereas the grand Tao fragment just happened to fall into his hand. What? There's actually someone who dared play tricks before this young master. Bastard! Leave the grand Tao fragment behind. Otherwise today will be the day of your death. Kill! Kill that damnable little brat. When they saw the grand Tao fragment that was within easy reach actually being picked away by an unfamiliar young man, everyone present was instantly angered to the point of stomping with rage while their eyes almost split open, and all of them roared loudly as they pursued him. The young man naturally was Xianxia. After he obtained this grand Tao fragment, he turned around and left right away without wasting the slightest amount of time, and his movements seemed to be extremely practiced, as if he'd done it countless times before. Swoosh! In the next moment, Xianxia relied on the speed of the wings of disruption that were on par with teleportation to vanish without a trace. Incidents like this didn't just occur in the region of flames, and similar scenes even occurred in other places like the region of water, the region of wood, the region of lightning. For a time, the entire dark parasol secret realm was shaken because everyone noticed that this string of incidents where someone took advantage of the situation to gain benefit was actually done by the same person. This was too shocking. After all, those Grand Tao fragments were extremely difficult to subdue, and not to mention Nether Transformation Realm Cultivator, even earthly Immortal Realm experts had to exert a great deal of effort. But this fellow just had to wave his hand and the Grand Tao fragment would obediently throw itself into his embrace like an obedient child. This caused everyone to be astounded, and they simply didn't dare believe their eyes. Especially impossible for all these experts to accept was this fellow actually committed such acts repeatedly and actually didn't fail a single time. After someone added these incidents up, they noticed that in merely this half a day of time, he'd already taken off with 5 Grand Tao fragments. This was absolutely an amount that was sufficient to make anyone go mad. After all, these weren't bits of cabbage, but real and actual precious treasures of the heavens and the earth. Every single piece was priceless, and they were practically impossible to find outside the dark parasol's abyss. On the other hand, that fellow had actually obtained 5 in a short amount of time, and this fact was absolutely capable of making everyone go crazy. Who's that fellow? Where's he from? How's he able to obtain the favor of the Grand Tao fragments so easily? This string of questions filled the hearts of every single expert, and it caused their hatred to grow the more they thought about it. They truly wished for nothing more than to capture the fellow and plunder him ruthlessly to take possession of the Grand Tao fragments in his possession. His actions were too oppressive. All of them had gone through so much of trouble, getting injured and killed, yet they didn't get anything in the end. So how could this not cause them to be aggrieved? Pursue him. We must capture this bastard that should be hacked to pieces. Brother, let's make a move together. This kid had numerous Grand Tao fragments in his possession. So how about we share it equally once we capture him? Right? We must capture this bastard as soon as possible. Otherwise, it would be more unfavorable to all of us as time passes. After all, once he refines and absorbs the Grand Tao fragment, it would be impossible for us to even get some scraps. Success or failure hinges on this action. Brothers, if you don't make a move now, then when? Charge. These calls that were filled with indignation and rage sounded out all over the dark parasol's secret realm, and they had an appearance of righteous indignation and seemed as if they wouldn't stop until they killed this thief. Everyone knew that one would at least require 3 to 5 days of time to refine and absorb a single Grand Tao fragment. So they had to capture this detestable fellow as soon as possible. Otherwise, they would really come back empty-handed. For a time, groups with murderous looks in their eyes were all over the dark parasol's secret realm, and they were like a dark cloud that whistled as it swept about. They searched everywhere and seemed as if they would dig 3 feet into the ground just to capture the thief. Such scenes could really be said to be astonishing. No matter if there was enmity between them in the past, all these experts that came from all over had joined forces tightly together and formed a front for the sake of capturing a single person. Even if the seniors of the sects behind them were to see this scene, they would probably not dare believe all of this was real. All the geniuses were furious and searched in all directions. All of them had their eyes wide open and didn't let any place escape their inspected. And this caused Xianxia to instantly feel boundless pressure and laugh bitterly without end. Never had he imagined that just taking away a few Grand Tao fragments would cause such a great commotion that caused him to not dare make a move rashly, and could only hide in a hidden cave within the region of Earth while lying low. But he didn't stay idle and seized this time to start meditating and tempering his black hole world. Presently, the 5 Grand Tao fragments he'd obtained had already fused into the black hole world, and they respectively contained the Grand Tao profundities of metal, fire, wood, water, and lightning. Due to the assistance of the dark parasol sapling, these Grand Tao fragments had already been completely refined and absorbed a long time ago, and the benefits they brought him were extremely shocking. The black hole world within his body had expanded repeatedly, and the true essence it contained was an entire 5 times more than before. At this moment, the mountains, lakes, plants, sun, moon, stars, everything within his black hole world was growing madly, possessed vast and tremendous vitality, and were filled with brilliant exuberance. This was the enormous benefit brought about by the grasp of his Grand Tao profundities of metal, wood, fire, water, and lightning attaining the perfection realm, and it caused his black hole world to become even more vast and rich. Most importantly, He was currently capable of exerting 5 times his combat strength. This was absolutely an astonishing improvement, and it wasn't sufficient to be described with the words steadily increasing, because it could be called a miracle that shook the world. If it was the day before today, she would never believe no matter what that his strength would actually improve to such a shocking degree in a single day, and it was simply astonishing. It was even to the extent that up until this moment, she still had a dazed feeling as if he was dreaming, because since he started cultivating until now, it was the first time he'd experienced this feeling of surprise and shock, and he was entirely unable to describe it with words. Moreover, this was the formidableness of fortuitous encounters. They were extraordinary, unexpected, and would always bring you a pleasant surprise. Only in this mysterious ground of the dark parasol's abyss would such an enormous fortuitous encounter exist, and it caused others to go mad and insane for it. But she knew that all of this was attributed to the dark parasol sapling within his body. It was formed from a strand of the dark parasol divine tree's soul, and it possessed a special attractive force to those grand Tao fragments, causing them to be unable to refuse him. It was because of this that he was able to obtain those grand Tao fragments so easily. On the other hand, the dark parasol sapling was from the tiny cauldron. I wonder where exactly is that chaotic divine crystal hidden. I must help the tiny cauldron find it this time, otherwise, I'd be unworthy of this gift it gave me. She took a deep breath and restrained the various feelings in his heart, and he didn't continue thinking before starting to meditate and understand the changes in his body. The successive explosive increase in his strength caused him to have no choice but to spend time and become accustomed to the change in his combat strength and adjust his methods of combat. If he still fought according to his combat methods of the past, then it would be a waste of his cultivation. Moreover, at this moment, the group of geniuses outside were rioting and searching everywhere for him, and they seemed as if they wanted to kill him. So it would be extremely unwise for him to go out rashly now. Perhaps only after he completely stabilized his cultivation would he be unafraid of all the threats in the outside world. 3 days have already passed. Why hasn't that kid been found? He wouldn't have left the dark parasol secret realm, right? Left? Humph. Presently, all the various powers have already found out that thief is called Xianxia and he's from the 9 Radiant Sword sect. Even if he leaves, he'll be unable to escape the pursuit of everyone. Let's go. The grand Tao fragment in the region of Earth is about to emerge. I heard there are already numerous experts that have rushed over, and we can't let such an opportunity slip by. Hehe. Grand Tao fragment? Everyone didn't come merely for that, and they've set up a trap instead and are waiting for their prey to enter. They're waiting for that kid to jump into the net himself. It can't be. Would that kid come when he sees there are so many of us? He surely will. According to my knowledge, his 2 companions from the 9 Radiant Sword sect have appeared within the region of Earth as well. So long as they're captured as hostages, then do you think that kid wouldn't come out? Ha ha ha. So that's how it is. It looks to me that this will work. A wave of conversation suddenly sounded out from outside the hidden cave, and Xianxia, who was in meditation with a restrained aura, was instantly jolted awake. A trap? Using my companions as hostages? How audacious of these bastards. They actually dare act in such a way, they really will stop at nothing. She stood up while icy lights flowed within his eyes that were completely icy cold. Region of Earth. Yellow sand covered the entire sky while the ground felt heavy, and sandstorms raged about everywhere. Walking within this region was like walking while carrying a mountain on one's shoulder, and it was filled with a strange gravitational field. If an ordinary person were to enter here, then the person would probably instantly be pressured by it to the point the person's blood flowed in the opposite direction and the 7 apertures started bleeding before the body exploded from being unable to endure this pressure. This sort of strange gravitational field was emitted from the aura of Earth, and it came from the tremendous force of the grand Tao of Earth. As the saying goes, the Earth is like a noble man that's capable of enduring great responsibility and constantly striving to become strong. The grand Tao of Earth was the emperor of the land, and it was similarly the most heavy and condensed existence amongst the grand Taos of the 5 elements. An enormous mountain that towered 30 kilometers into the sky stood towering at the center of the region of Earth. It was grand and magnificent like a dragon that resided there, and the surroundings of the mountain surged with an extremely shocking energy fluctuation. It was the aura of the grand Tao of Earth that was vast, terrifying, and heavy to the extreme, and only a single strand was sufficient to crush a mountain ridge. Moreover, this enormous mountain was completely filled with a terrifying aura of the grand Tao of Earth, and it caused others to utterly not dare approach it rashly for fear of being crushed apart by the heavy energy. At this moment, many cultivators were already crowded around nearby the enormous mountain. Group after group of them were scattered all around the vital points in the surroundings of the enormous mountain, and they were accumulating strength while waiting to guard this place to the death. Moreover, there were large groups of cultivators frequently rushing over from the distant sky, and they joined into the crowd, causing the crowd's numbers to grow more and more. Moreover, there was no lack of some top experts whose names shook the world amongst them. Everyone present knew clearly that a grand Tao fragment that had the grand Tao of Earth branded upon it was surely hidden within the enormous mountain before them, and it was about to emerge into the world. But they didn't come only for the grand Tao fragment this time, and they had another objective. That damnable bastard is really patient. He's still able to refrain from making an appearance at a time like this. Could it be that he noticed the situation wasn't going well a long time ago and fled? Don't worry, he'll come for sure. Exactly. I don't believe he'll disregard the lives of the disciples from his own sect. If he really dares to do that, then even the 9 Radiant Sword sect wouldn't let him go. Hee. That couldn't be any better. Various sounds of discussion resounded out as the gazes of most people frequently swept towards the same direction, and they seemed to harbor malicious intent. Only a man and a woman stood alone at that direction. The man was tall, handsome, and imposing. The woman was beautiful like a celestial maiden and possessed a bearing that was ethereal. It was precisely Long Jinbei and Anwei. Both their expressions were slightly heavy when being surrounded by layer upon layer of people, especially when they heard the discussions that sounded out from the surroundings and simply fearlessly took them to be lambs that were waiting to be slaughtered. It caused them to be extremely furious in their hearts. Since they started cultivating until now, when had they suffered such treatment? I truly wish for nothing more than to kill these bastards. They actually dare treat us like this. I'll deal with them one by one after I free myself from this encirclement. And I'll change my surname if I don't trample upon them until they scream for their mothers. Long Jinbei's expression was gloomy, and he gnashed his teeth with hatred. As a top figure amongst the seed disciples of the 9 Radiant Sword sect, he was popular and admired no matter where he went, and he got anything he wanted. Yet now he was like a prisoner that was threatened, and others were talking about him while fearlessly trampling upon his dignity. This strong difference caused him to wish for nothing more than to launch a slaughter. What's the point of saying all this now? Everyone present is from the various powers of the Dark Reverie, and they've already disregarded that we're disciples of the 9 Radiant Sword sect for the sake of capturing junior brother Xianxia. And Wei shook her head as a wisp of bitterness couldn't help but suffuse the corners of her mouth. Long Jinbei couldn't help but laugh bitterly without end when Xianxia was mentioned, and then he sighed with emotion. In the past, I only took junior brother Xianxia to be a fellow that got lucky and was nothing worth mentioning. Never had I imagined that this fellow actually caused such a great commotion in the Dark Parasol secret realm and caused the members of the various powers to almost go mad with hatred. That can be considered as a type of ability because which ordinary person could compare to him? It seemed to be words of ridicule, yet his voice carried a wisp of admiration, and he seemed to carry a proud appearance of taking pride in Xianxia. Since Xianxia saved his life the other day, he'd already accepted this junior brother of his, Xianxia, and he didn't have any more ill feelings towards Xianxia. Junior brother Xianxia really isn't someone an ordinary person can compare to, and Wei deeply agreed. After that, a wisp of a firm expression appeared on her classical and gorgeous face. Senior brother Long, we've been trapped here because those fellows have taken us to be bait and intend to wait for junior brother Xianxia to fall into the net himself. One this occurs, then not to mention junior brother Xianxia, even we will die without a doubt. Then what do you think we should do, junior sisterin? Asked Long Jinbei. Let's join forces while junior brother Xianxia hasn't come to kill our way out. And Wei went silent for a long time before she spoke slowly. and her eyes already carried a wisp of piercingly cold killing intent. "All right, we'll do just that. I'll fight with all my strength. And even if I die, I'll send junior sister an out." Long Jinbei took a deep breath with a firm expression, and he was arrogant and overbearing as he spoke word by word. "Senior brother Long, you?" And Wei was stunned as she never imagined Long Jinbei would actually speak like this. Long Jinbei smiled light-heartedly and interrupted her. "Junior sister, and there's no need to say anything. I'm not only doing this for you or for Chen Shi, and it's also for our 9 Radiant Sword sect as well. For the sect." And Wei was greatly moved by this in her heart, and she was extremely dazed. Right, perhaps all of us are unconvinced of each other's strength when within the sect, and we compete endlessly with each other. But once we leave the sect, we represent the 9 Radiant Sword sect. We share weal and woe and are bound together for good and bad, so we naturally should fight for the honor of the sect. "Exactly, for the sect." Long Jinbei nodded, and his expression was unprecedentedly firm and persistent. "Humph, intending to risk your lives." Right at this moment, a sneer suddenly sounded out from far away, and it instantly interrupted their thoughts. When they raised their eyes and looked up, they saw a white-clothed young man who walked over trippingly. This was a handsome young man with a tall figure who walked with steady footsteps. He possessed skin that was white like jade, a pair of eyes that were deep like the starry sky, and dense jet-black hair that hung loosely before his chest and behind him, causing him to have a unique bearing. "Feng Jianbai, you still dare to appear before me? Despicable scum." Long Jinbei's eyes were suffused with a trace of dense killing intent when he saw this person because he knew who this person was. This person was from the Truth Embrace sect and was a junior brother of Taoist Crimson Sun. However, this person's strength was nothing when compared to Taoist Crimson Sun, let alone be a match for him, and he was able to easily annihilate a bunch of such trash. And Wei's beautiful brows knit together as well as a wisp of dense detest suffused her eyes. The reason both of them had come to this region of Earth was entirely because they were deceived by this person. The reason was extremely simple. He was a disciple of the Truth Embrace sect after all. He used the name of Taoist Crimson Sun and spreading the word that he knew where Chen Shi was hiding, and he said he wanted to bring them over to gather with Chen Shi. But never had they imagined that after they arrived here, they would actually fall into a trap that had been placed a long time ago. "Senior brother Long, according to my estimation, Chen Shi will quickly come and gather with both of you. This isn't considered to be deceit, right?" Feng Jianbai shrugged as he spoke with an innocent expression. "You're still resorting to excuses at a time like this? Do you really think I don't dare kill you?" Long Jinbei frowned as his icy cold gaze locked onto Feng Jianbai like a bolt of lightning, and he emanated an oppressive aura. "Senior brother Long, once you make a move, you'll probably be unable to see Chen Shi forever." Feng Jianbai wasn't enraged in the slightest, and he shrugged and glanced towards the other side as he spoke. There was a black-clothed young man sitting cross-legged and without moving on a rock with his eyes closed there, and his entire body seemed to have fused into the heavens and the earth and emitted an indescribable aura. He looked to be calm yet gave people a horrifying and unfathomable feeling. He was like a ferocious tiger that was building up its strength, and once one infuriated it, one would surely suffer annihilation. Long Jinbei noticed this black-clothed young man as well, and his gaze couldn't help but narrow slightly, yet there wasn't any fear on his face. He knew that this fellow was the most famous madman of the Heavenflow Dao sect, Xianxia. This was absolutely a freak whose blood was filled with boundless desire to do battle, and he sought out people to challenge from all over, yet rarely lost. He was someone that was known by all in the same generation, and he was ferocious and formidable to the extreme. Even though Long Jinbei wasn't afraid of him, he knew clearly that he didn't have much confidence in being able to successfully defeat this black-clothed young man. "So in this way, your actions didn't just obtain the agreement of your senior brother Taoist Crimson Sun, you've even joined forces with the Heavenflow Dao sect and the others' powers with the intention of sending us to our doom?" And Wei spoke out abruptly. "Humph, what are you talking about, joining forces? How baffling!" Feng Jianbai was stunned before sneering without end. No matter if it was true or not, he would absolutely not admit it so as to avoid causing it to become grounds for ridicule. And Wei roughly confirmed her guesses when she saw this, and her heart grew heavy. Under such a situation that even the Truth Embrace sect and Heavenflow Dao sect had interfered, they obviously didn't intend to leave any survivors. I advise both of you to stay here obediently. Presently, there are more than 10 powers that have converged here, and they amount to entire few hundreds of people, and there's no lack of top figures amongst them. Do both of you think you're capable of carving out a path of blood? Feng Jianbai grinned as he swept them with his gaze, and a threatening tone was fully discernible within his tone. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left without even sparing them another glance. Even a tiny ant from the Truth Embrace sect dares to put on airs before me. As the saying goes, one who loses his position may be subjected to great insult. Long Jinbei's expression was gloomy to the extremely, and he truly wished for nothing more than to disregard everything and launch a slaughter before doing anything else. Calm yourself. Until the final moment arrives, who can be sure that there isn't a trace of hope? And Wei took a deep breath and tried hard to restrain the worry and anxiousness in her heart as she said with a light voice, even if there's no hope in the end, we can't just die like this. At the very least, we have to pull a few down with us. Long Jinbei nodded, and he'd already made the preparations to fight with his life on the line. Along with the passage of time, the cultivators that came over grew larger and larger in number, and they almost numbered 1,000. All of them patrolled the surroundings of the enormous mountain while looking towards the distance from time to time, and they seemed to be waiting for someone to make an appearance. The atmosphere became more and more tense, as if a storm was about to come. The trap is already set, will that damnable kid come? The patience in the hearts of everyone faded bit by bit, and they became impatient and restless, causing even the gazes they shot at Wei and Long Jinbei to become more and more hostile. Almost 1,000 experts from varying powers were distributed all over before the enormous mountain, and they tightly encircled Wei and Long Jinbei. I finally believe your intuition now. That kid really is a troublemaker, as he actually drew so many people over to capture him. I have no choice but to exclaim with admiration. The Nether Spring Sect's Chojun had his hands behind his back while his clothes fluttered in the wind, yet his body was like a rock that was firm, alone, and towering, causing him to carry an arrogance of someone that ruled over the world. There are a lot of people. At the side, Shroud, who carried a gloomy and mysterious aura, emitted a ghastly and emotionless voice. Yes, once more people arrive, the competition would be greater, and the difficulty to obtain Permitha, Oblivion, and even Terminus Dao insight in that kid's possession will become greater as well. After all, there were too many experts presents here, and most of them had come for the sake of the Grand Dao fragments in Xianxia's possession, so the difficulty to capture him for themselves was obvious. We can take advantage of the confusion. After keeping silent for a long time, Shroud spoke once more. That's what I intend. Chojun smiled lightly before he stared fixedly at Shroud and said seriously, I need your help. Shroud didn't say anything further and only nodded. Chojun started smiling as a wisp of strong confidence gushed up onto his face. With the assistance of Shroud, he would be no different to a tiger that grew wings, and it would allow him to have great confidence in being able to capture Xianxia. I'm able to sense that the murderer who killed the ancestor is approaching here. The eyes of the expert of the Yazi clan, Lai Feng, flickered with a bright light as he spoke excitedly. Great! Once we capture this bastard, we must skin him alive and pull out his tendons before torturing him inch by inch until death, right? He actually dared to take possession of the ancestor's respected body, and he must return this tenfold. The most important is still to reclaim the sacred weapon of our clan and ancestors' innate bone. We absolutely can't allow the God-slaughter burst to be lost. The spirits of the other experts from the Yazi clan were refreshed, and they rubbed their palms together while their eyes flickered with ruthless and bloodthirsty sheens. Senior brother Lai Feng, do you think the murderer is the 9 Radiance Sword Sect's Xianxia? An expert of the Yazi clan suddenly realized something, and he spoke anxiously and doubtfully. Xianxia. Lai Feng was stunned, and then his face went grim. If this were to be true, Then it would be too troublesome because there were so many experts present here now. How would he recover the sacred weapon of their clan and the innate bone of their ancestor if Xianxia fell into the hands of another? Be at ease and wait. If the murderer really is Xianxia, then we'll make a move together as soon as he appears, and we must strive to capture him with a swift and fierce attack. Lai Feng pondered silently for a long time before he took a breath and spoke while gritting his teeth, and his voice was ghastly and emanated boundless, ruthless killing intent. Damn it! Being tricked by that kid the other day caused my Flameox clan to suffer heavy losses. This time we have to kill him no matter what. It isn't just that, we also have to reclaim our Grand Dao fragment. If it wasn't for this detestable kid, we'd have obtained the Grand Dao fragment in the region of metal a long time ago, and how could we have possibly have waited until now? One that seizes my precious treasure and kills my clansmen must repay it with blood. At the other side, the few experts of the Flameox clan had ferocious gazes and murderous looks on their faces as they gnashed their teeth, and when they recalled what had happened in the region of metal, all of them were almost on the verge of exploding and going mad from rage. As the leader of the members of the Flameox clan that had come to the Dark Parasol's abyss this time, Jiang Wei, had been silent all the time instead. Actually, he was even more infuriated than his companions and wished even more to slice Xianxia into 1,000 pieces. But this monstrous rage had been restrained in his heart since long ago, and he was just waiting for Xianxia to appear before completely erupting. Conversations like this occurred in every single place nearby the enormous mountain. Some had come for the sake of taking revenge, some had come for the sake of seizing the Grand Dao fragments, some had come to reclaim the sacred treasure of their clan, and so on and so forth. All in all of them had made sufficient preparations this time, and they were only waiting for Xianxia to make an appearance. However, after a long time had passed, Xianxia still hadn't made an appearance, nor was there any news about him, and this caused everyone present to become even more anxious and impatient. Since he isn't making an appearance, then I'll fucking enjoy this beauty first and fiercely humiliate her. I don't believe I'll be unable to force that Xianxia out. Suddenly, an expert from the Sixth Desire Devil sect shot his gaze at Anwei while moving his gaze wantonly up and down her beautiful face and alluring body, and he revealed a lustful and greedy sheen from his eyes. That's a genius of one of the 10 great immortal sects, the 9 Radiant Sword sect. How wonderful would it feel if I'm able to have her beneath me? Ha! The flower-picking devil, Feng Bao, is finally unable to restrain himself. Go on, senior brother Feng Bao. Everyone will cheer for you, and you can vent to your heart's content. Ha! When they saw Feng Bao wanted to encroach on Anwei, all the other disciples of the Sixth Desire Devil sect cheered endlessly with excited expressions, and the gazes they shot at Anwei were filled with greed and extreme brazen. You're courting death. Long Jinbei burst into rage when he saw this because a disciple from the Devil sects actually dared to disrespect a member of their 9 Radiant Sword sect, and it was simply going too far. Anwei's face went cold while her eyes surged with boundless killing intent. As a genius of the 9 Radiant Sword sect, when had she ever been sullied and humiliated so unbearably? It caused her to be truly infuriated. When they saw the appearance of the two of them, those disciples of the Sixth Desire Devil sect became even more rampant and roared with laughter, while the words that came out of their mouths became even more unbearable and filthy to the limit. Feng Jianbai chuckled without end. Yen Shirshan sat cross-legged on a rock and remained indifferent. Even the disciples of the other sects ranked amongst the 10 great sects were indifferent, and some even stood on the spot and watched with interest. Their appearances caused Long Jinbei and Anwei to burn with rage, while their hearts sank to rock bottom. Come, beauty, we'll just have some fun. This young master has had countless women, and my skill in the bed is absolutely perfect. I guarantee you'll desire more after you try it and be unable to stop. Ha! Being encouraged by everyone caused Feng Bao to become even more complacent, and he had a lusty smile on his face as he intended to make a move against Anwei. At the same time, Long Jinbei and Anwei glanced at each other. Both of them discerned the intentions of the other, causing their expressions to turn resolute because they intended to risk their lives to kill off all these bastards. However, right when a battle could be triggered at any moment, an unexpected event arose abruptly. A piercingly cold and extremely murderous voice sounded out abruptly from the distant sky. Just because of these words you've spoken, you must pay with your life. The voice was like a thunderclap that shook the 9 heavens, and it resounded out in the ears of every single person present here. After that, under the focused gazes of everyone present, a tall figure suddenly flashed over from the extremely distant sky. The figure had a handsome appearance, fluttering long hair and clothes, and an extraordinary bearing. It was precisely Xianxia. Why is this fellow so stupid? Why did he come? And Wei was stunned when she saw this figure, and besides feeling moved in her heart, a wisp of dense worry couldn't help but arise in her heart. This is no different than giving his life away. This fellow really doesn't cherish his own life. He seemed to be complaining, yet a wisp of warmth had gushed out into Long Jinbei's heart, because he knew that the reason Xianxia did this was surely because of him and Wei. So how could he not be moved by this? Unlike the two of them, everyone else present here simply seemed as if they'd seen a treasure chest appear in the sky when they saw Xianxia make an appearance. And all of them became excited and rubbed their hands together while feeling eager to make a move. Ha ha ha! This damnable kid has finally come. I never imagined that this kid has a slight conscience, and he knew he had no choice but to help those from his own sect when they were in trouble. Humph! Conscience my ass. In my opinion, he was drawn over by the grand Tao fragment that's about to emerge. Moreover, is he able to rescue them by himself? It's simply laughable. Instantly, the area before enormous mountain that had a grand Tao fragment buried beneath it seethed with excitement because of Xianxia's arrival, and every single person didn't conceal their boundless greed and killing intent in the slightest. Xianxia's expression still remained calm when facing this scene, and his gaze swept past the faces of everyone present. As he looked at the excitement and greed on their faces, a wisp of killing intent that blazed like lava suddenly gushed out into his heart. For the sake of capturing and killing me, they actually used my companions as hostage and stopped at nothing. Such methods are simply despicable and shameless to the limit. Xianxia, when you seized my grand Tao fragment in the region of metal the other day, you caused many of the disciples of my Flameox clan to perish. This enmity is irreconcilable, so hand over your life. Suddenly, a roar that shook the heavens sounded out as the Flameox clan's Jiang Wei soared into the sky and actually led those other clansmen of his to charge first towards Xianxia. How laughable! It was all of you who seized the opportunity when I wasn't on guard to strike a surprise attack on me, yet were unable to obtain the grand Tao fragment in the end. Now you put the blame on me instead and sling mud at me. You really deserve death. Xianxia's eyes were icy cold like blades as the tune of the Tao rumbled throughout his body like the roar of a dragon. Talisman markings roiled as he suddenly took a step forward like a king that descended to the world. This step seemed extremely simple when it was taken, yet it surged with a shapeless field that contained the supreme profundity of the grand confinement Tao art, causing Jiang Wei and the others who hadn't charged forward yet to be instantly shackled while floating in midair, causing them to be unable to move at all. They were like a few flies that were stuck on a spider's web, and no matter how they struggled, they were unable to escape the restraints of the shackles, causing the scene to be extremely strange. After that, Xianxia raised his head as he looked over with a gaze that seemed like bolts of lightning, and his voice erupted like a thunderclap in spring as he spoke 2 words. Fuck off! These 2 words shook the clouds and the wind, and it was like the furious howl of a god, causing Jiang Wei and the others to seem as if they'd been smashed by a sledgehammer. The bones in their entire bodies cracked as they broke while they bled from their 7 apertures, and their bodies spasmed violently. Everyone was shocked. What sort of Tao art is this? He restrained Jiang Wei and the others with a single step, and then he spat out 2 words to heavily injure all of them. This was simply on the verge of being comparable with the supreme technique of utilizing techniques with a single word. Rumble. Space trembled as Xianxia restrained his aura, allowing Jiang Wei and the others to recover their freedom. But due to their injuries being too severe, they directly fell onto the ground while emitting endless and miserably howls of pain. Intense pain came from every inch of their bodies as countless bones had been broken. Jiang Wei and the others were terrified and uneasy as they looked at Xianxia, who was in midair, and they seemed as if they'd seen the god of ghosts, causing their will to fight to collapse before they struggled to get up with the intention of fleeing for their lives. Swoosh! A fierce and peerless sword chi suddenly appeared out of thin air, and it swept by lightly, causing a string of scarlet-red blood and bloody heads to fly up into the sky along with it. Instantly, numerous experts of the Flamox clan were annihilated. This scene shocked everyone present here, because the experts of the Flamox clan could absolutely not be compared to useless people. Yet now, they hadn't even charged and arrived in front of Xianxia before being annihilated. The experts of the Yazi clan originally intended to charge out at the first possible moment under Lai Feng's lead before capturing and killing Xianxia, but having the Flamox clan seize the first caused them to be rather depressed. However, the scene before their eyes were like a bucket of cold water poured onto their heads, causing them to be unable to help but shiver while feeling extremely fortunate in their hearts. I never imagined that, after only not seeing him for half a year, this fellow has actually grown to such an extent. Feng Jianbai's eyelids twitched as he looked at the tall figure that stood proudly in the distant sky, and besides feeling shocked, he couldn't help but feel deep envy. After all, if it wasn't for Xianxia's appearance, the position of first on the Martial Emperor's War Soul tablet in the primeval battlefield would have belonged to him, Feng Jianbai. But at that time, even though he was surpassed by Xianxia, he didn't take it to heart. After all, it only represented potential, and he possessed a cultivation that was much higher than Xianxia. However, when he saw Xianxia had actually annihilated all the experts of the Flamox clan with the flip of his hand, how could Feng Jianbai not be shocked? He had no choice but to admit that he'd already been left far behind by Xianxia. This won't do. With such a great opportunity like this fellow must be eliminated. Otherwise, once he grows, how extraordinary would he be? As thoughts flickered within Feng Jianbai's mind, he'd already made a decision. In the next moment, he'd already soared into the sky and said loudly, "Fellow Taoists, this kid Xianxia is like a locust that takes advantage of the situation and has seized our fortuitous encounters. He's simply lawless and too wicked to be pardoned. Now that he has come here alone, it's precisely the best opportunity to eliminate this thief. If all of you don't make a move now, then what are you waiting for?" Everyone was stunned and instantly recovered from their shock caused by the scene from before. Right? This thief is all alone, but there are over 1,000 experts from the various powers here. Now that he's come walking into a trap, isn't it the best time to draw the net in? Moreover, so long as he'd killed, the 5 grand Dao fragments in his possession would become unowned. Wouldn't it be there to be seized and distributed at our mercy? The more they thought about it, the more excited they became, and their hearts were filled with dense greed. Even their breathing became heavy as they became eager to make a move, causing them to rub their palms together. Conversely, when Xianxia saw an old acquaintance like Feng Jianbai come out and instigate everyone to go against him in unison, Xianxia couldn't help but sneer endlessly in his heart. As the saying goes, he who doesn't finish his snake off will be harmed by it in the future. Kill! Kill this thief, and the grand Dao fragments in his possession will be ours. The corners of Feng Jianbai's mouth couldn't help but reveal a trace of complacency when he saw the intense reactions of everyone, and he continued fanning the flames. As soon as he finished speaking, he'd completely lit the unrestrainable flames of greed in the hearts of everyone, and all of them couldn't restrain themselves any longer. Bang! Brilliant rays of light charged into the sky as various Dao arts and divine abilities piled up together and sprayed down like blazing and terrifying lava. A group of extremely formidable beings from the clans of the primordial era had made a move boldly, and they charged forward. At this moment, Xianxia moved as well. Dao insight rumbled throughout his body as his entire body was coiled by peerless divine lights, and he seemed to hold the world in his palm and the sun and moon in his mouth. The wings of disruption flickered as he leaped into the crowd in the next moment and directly pounced down to slaughter them. Swish! Numerous terrifying palm prints piled up together like numerous layers of overlapping waves that surged and pushed forward. This was the peak-grade Dao art, Myriad Netherwave Palm. Unlike before, its might was an entire 5 times more formidable now, and it was like a howling ocean that swept forward while filled with a monstrous and all-powerful imposing aura. Bang! 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 The glow of blood flew in all directions as the 10+ experts that charged straight at him were directly slapped apart by the terrifying force of the palm strike. Their bodies split apart, their bodies were mangled, and they died in midair on the spot before falling down towards the ground like raindrops. Once he made a move, she didn't hesitate in the slightest, and he seemed like a sovereign that had descended to the world. He executed a myriad of profound techniques and profundities with every single move he made, and he was like an all that forcefully gave rise to a string of blood and shrill cries in the crowd. He swept through every obstacle before him. His might was like a great god of devils that fought while bathed in blood. He was bathed in the blood of his enemies, reaped the lives of his enemies, and in only the time of a few breath, a few tens of experts had fallen at his hands. If one were to look up from the ground, one would notice that it was like a rain of blood was falling from midair. It was dense, bloody, and mixed with damaged magic treasures and shattered corpses, causing it to be extremely shocking. Even the air was tainted scarlet red by the dense amount of blood. This was the formidableness of 5 times combat strength. Especially with Xianxia's foundation being extremely thick and far exceeding most geniuses, the scale of his black hole world was sufficient to terrify anyone if news of it were to be spread. Moreover, he'd grasped over 40 types of peak-grade Tao arts and the boundless profundities of the all-heaven truth. Coupled with the wings of disruption that could be ranked in the top 30 on the divine ability gold rankings of the 3 dimensions and the eye of divine truth that shocked the 3 dimensions, he was simply like a weapon of slaughter that was armed to the teeth. All in all, the current Xianxia absolutely couldn't be compared to before. No matter if it was in terms of equipment or strength, it far exceeded most experts. Even if it was amongst powers like the 10 great immortal sects and the 6 lineages of the devil sects, a freak like Xianxia was exceedingly rare and practically impossible to find. Rumble. The terrifying fluctuations of the battle filled the heavens and the earth, causing the clouds and wind to be thrown into disorder, while yin and yang were shattered. The heavens and the earth were cast into a shadow and fell into great chaos, causing it to seem like purgatory on earth. On the other hand, Xianxia was all-powerful within this chaos. His figure was like a wispy shadow of light that flickered endlessly. Every single time the wings of disruption flickered, it would cause him to move as if he was teleporting and avoid the attacks that covered the heavens and the earth. Everywhere he passed, the profound disruption divine light flowed and swept out repeatedly. Some experts were caught off guard, causing the magic treasures in their hands that contained the 5 elements to be destroyed into a pile of scrap with a bang, and it shocked them to the point they were both terrified and pained from their loss. Only magic treasures that were quasi-immortal artifacts were barely capable of resisting the profound disruption divine light. But even though they weren't blasted apart, they were greatly damaged, causing their might to be reduced greatly. Xianxia hadn't paid the slightest attention to all this because there was only a single thought in his heart. Kill all of these despicable scum that stop at nothing. If it was a few days before when he hadn't grasped the ability to execute 5 times his combat strength, he simply didn't dare imagine how much hardship he would suffer when facing a scene like this, and he would most probably perish on the spot. Moreover, he had no choice but to come because Wei and Long Jinbei were trapped. Since those of the same sect were in peril, how could he possibly watch on and disregard them? If he did that, then how could he remain humane? If it wasn't even able to be a person properly, then how could he become an immortal? So he'd come. He'd come with 5 times his combat strength, and he vented and poured his belly full of flames of rage and fury onto his enemies. Kill! Xianxia roared as he moved like a dragon that left its lair. He moved about freely while fusing everything he'd learned into his boundless killing intent and fury before venting it out, causing him to sweep through all obstacles and practically seem all-powerful. For a time, the heavens and the earth were filled with the horrifying scene of sprays of a rain of blood, falling severed limbs, and shrill cries of pain, and it caused everyone to be shocked and filled with disbelief. His strength had risen explosively by too much. As he looked at the tall figure in midair that seemed to have entered a place that was without obstacles, Shroud's strange violet-colored pupils were suffused with a rare trace of shock. He'd naturally discerned that compared to the time he tried to assassinate Xianxia in the Sea of Clouds, the current Xianxia was more than 2 times stronger and was simply like a different person. Oh! Qiujun couldn't help but reveal a shocked expression when he heard this. Xianxia was capable of avoiding Shroud's assassination even before his strength rose explosively. So doesn't that mean he has become even more terrifying now? How much confidence do you have in dealing with him? Qiujun took a deep breath and asked slowly, but he was thinking in his heart. How did this Xianxia make his strength rise explosively in a short few days of time? Could it be that he completely refined and absorbed all of the Grand Tao fragments he obtained? When he thought up to here, Qiujun himself couldn't help but be shocked by this guess of his because it was too unbelievable. Those were 5 Grand Tao fragments, so how could he have possibly refined and absorbed them completely in a short few days of time? Not to mention him, even a great figure like an earthly immortal realm expert would find it difficult to achieve. Qiujun was extremely sure. However, he suddenly thought of another thing. When Xianxia seized away those Grand Tao fragments, Xianxia had just waved his hand before easily obtaining them. Could it be that he has some sort of secret treasure in his possession that innately restrains these Grand Tao fragments? The more he thought about it, the more he felt it was absurd and unbelievable, and he became slightly dazed. It was at this moment that Shroud gave him an answer. If I seize the opportunity when he's exhausted and suddenly launch a surprise attack, then I should have a 70% certainty. Shroud spoke calmly with a voice that was cold and devoid of emotion as usual. This sentence was absolutely the most words Qiujun had heard Shroud speak in a single sentence since he knew Shroud, and besides causing Qiujun to be surprised, he couldn't help but be shocked in his heart. Under the circumstances that Xianxia's exhausted, Shroud actually said he only has a 70% certainty. Looks like I have no choice but to take this fellow seriously. Qiujun's eyes narrowed slightly while a cold light that was like the gleam of a blade appeared within his eyes. He'd already taken Xianxia to be a formidable enemy and didn't dare look down upon Xianxia or be careless in the slightest. Just like Shroud, he was waiting for the time Xianxia was exhausted to capture Xianxia in one go. Bang! Xianxia raised his hand, causing talisman markings to surge and shoot into the sky before slapping numerous experts flying. And then he turned around without the slightest hesitation and flashed towards the other side. However, right at this moment, someone shouted out abruptly, "Xianxia, return the innate bone of my clan and we'll leave right away." Xianxia turned around and a group of experts with peerlessly violent auras had already encircled over. All of them were robust and formidable, and their exposed skin was suffused with a dark red-colored sheen. This was a group of beings from the clans of the primordial era. If I'm not wrong, they should be from the Yazi clan. In merely an instant, he recalled the ferocious beast Yazi that he'd seen on a star in the Sea of Clouds earlier, the sword that was deep red like blood, and the Yazi's innate bone. Humph! What innate bone? Fuck off if you don't want to die. Xianxia grunted coldly as he withdrew the bloody sword at the same time, and then he slashed out without holding back in the slightest. When they saw Xianxia attack at the slightest disagreement and even utilize their Yazi clan's sacred weapon to deal with him, it angered Lai Feng and the others to the point of being on the verge of spitting blood. He's such a bully. Our Yazi clan has always been renowned in the world for seeking vengeance for the smallest grievance. Now, we've actually taken the initiative to make a compromise and only asked for the ancestors' innate bone. Yet this fellow actually didn't even refuse before directly attacking? Motherfucker. Could it be that this fellow doesn't know why the Yazi clan is famous for taking revenge? Lai Feng and the others felt this world was too insane as there was someone who was actually more ruthless than their Yazi clan. He'd seized their belongings, yet still dared to boldly be ruthless towards them, and they felt Xianxia was simply lawless. But even though they were furious, Lai Feng and the others didn't dare dally in the slightest when facing this resolute attack of Xianxia's, and all of them executed their ultimate moves without the slightest hesitation. Because all of them knew how formidable the might of the sacred weapon of their clan was. All of those years ago, it had once drunk the blood of a saint. Bang! The glow of blood surged while filled with boundless killing intent, and it formed into the terrifying scene of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. At the instant it appeared, It charged into the 9 heavens and dyed the world red. The dense and surging bloody killing intent almost desired to slaughter the gods and destroy the heavens. In only an instant, the attacks of Lai Feng and the others were easily dispersed, and if it wasn't for them dodging quickly, merely this attack would have almost taken their lives. It shocked them to the point their faces suddenly went pale, and they were extremely astounded. What a terrifying cultivation in the sword Dao. They'd clearly noticed that not only did the sword strike carry an extraordinary high level of being able to condense sword chi into strings, it actually contained the purest profundities of the Grand Tao of Slaughter. Condensing sword chi into threads was something only grandmasters of the sword Tao were capable of mastering, and it was even more terrifying than the enlightened sword heart. In 10,000 sword cultivators, it was difficult for a single person to grasp this level. On the other hand, the Grand Tao of Slaughter was even rarer and terrifying, especially when it was executed through the sacred weapon of their Yazi clan. It was simply like a perfect pairing that was capable of erupting with an even stronger might. This fellow is actually a formidable sword cultivator. Lai Feng was horrified. He knew that it was impossible for just the forces of the Yazi clan to be a match for Chun Shi without the assistance of the other powers. So before Chun Shi could make a move once again, he'd already turned around and left, and he intended to mix into the group before making a move based on the situation. Unfortunately, he was still too late. Chun Shi had already launched a slaughter, so how could he allow his opponents to leave? Especially when he was deeply aware of how vengeful these experts of the Yazi clan were. Once they were allowed to escape, then it would absolutely lead to boundless future troubles. Bang! A bloody glow swept out while sword insight moved like a tide. The might of this sacred weapon from the Yazi clan was formidable indeed, and it far surpassed a quasi-immortal artifact. Besides its lack of an artifact spirit, it was sufficient for it to be comparable with a real immortal artifact. At this moment, when it was utilized by Chun Shi with the profundities of the Slaughter Grand Tao, he was instantly like a god of blood that had descended to the world. A bloody glow that covered the sky shot out horizontally, and not only did it slash Lai Feng and the others apart from the waist, even the other nearby experts were affected by it, causing no less than 10+ people to perish. A rain of blood exploded out and trickled to the ground, and the scene was bloody and horrifying. Everyone was instantly shocked as their hearts thumped madly. It was too terrifying. Since the battle began until now, Chun Shi practically swept through every obstacle before him and had never encountered any obstruction. He seemed to possess the imposing aura of sweeping through all obstacles and killing everyone before him. He was formidable to the extreme. Many experts that were charging forward couldn't help but stop as they gulped down a mouthful of saliva with difficulty, and they hesitated about whether they should turn around and run, so that they could avoid being moths that fluttered into the fire and fall to the same horrifying end as those others. For a time, an empty space was actually created around Chun Shi, and no one dared to move forward anymore. This fellow is simply too shocking. Long Jinbei couldn't help but swing his fist fiercely and be extremely excited. He was similarly shocked by Chun Shi's terrifying strength, but it was mostly excitement that he felt because he was like a person facing a hopeless situation that had suddenly saw hope, and he felt indescribably excited. Indeed, his strength has become stronger by at least a few times when compared to his strength while going against Wang Zhonghuan. And Wei's clear eyes spun as she looked at the figure in midair that was bathed in blood and was immovable in battle like a god of devils, and her eyes were suffused with ripples of extraordinary splendor. She could be said to be the only person present that had witnessed Chun Shi's mighty rise, and it was precisely because of this that the shock in her heart was even more intense than the others. For example, Chun Shi had revealed a bearing that was different to the others when he joined the 9 Radiant Sword sect. Every single person didn't look favorably upon him, yet he would always create shocking miracles. It was as if nothing in this world could obstruct his footsteps, and everything could only become his stepping stones that allowed him to go higher and further. Let's make a move as well. Chun Shi is already fighting for us, so how can we not respond? Long Jinbei's gaze was like bolts of lightning as boundless battle intent surged in his body. He wasn't a weakling, nor was he a pitiable person that would wait for death helplessly. Conversely, he'd grasped the ability to multiply his combat strength by 5 times, and he was only a step away from 6 times combat strength. Amongst everyone present here, those that were capable of worrying him could be counted on a single hand. "All right," and Wei nodded as a murderous expression appeared on her clear and beautiful face because she'd already been feeling impatient since a long time ago. Wouldn't it be better to just watch silently? Why interfere? Right at the instant both of them wanted to make a move, Xianxia, who sat cross-legged with his eyes closed on a rock at the side and seemed to be unconcerned with everything in the surroundings, had suddenly opened his eyes, and blazing flames actually surged within his eyes like 2 roiling seas of flames, causing it to be an extremely shocking sight. He gestured with his hand as he spoke. Bang! 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 Metallic bangs resounded out as 8 large flags that surged with the glow of flames flew up and pierced fiercely into the surrounding ground. And then it instantly formed into a profound entrapment formation that trapped Long Jinbei and Enwei within it. This is the 8 illusion immortal cage that's formed from 8 quasi-immortal artifacts. Even earthly immortal realm experts would find it difficult to escape this formation. Both of you can relax and wait within. Since we're all disciples from the 10 great immortal sects, I won't make it difficult for the 2 of you. Xianxia spoke indifferently before closing his eyes once more after he finished. From the beginning until the end, he didn't give Wei and Long Jinbei the opportunity to speak, and his calm voice carried peerlessly overbearingness and arrogance. In fact, he was really formidable because he was actually capable of casually trapping Long Jinbei and Enwei together, and he didn't even give them the chance to react. Thus, his strength was obvious from this. Being trapped instantly caused Long Jinbei and Enwei to seem as if they'd instantly lost the energy in their entire bodies, and they were both furious and frustrated. Never had both of them imagined that this renowned madman of the Heavenflow Dao sect, Xianxia, would actually be more formidable than the rumors said. The only thing that allowed them to be at ease was that Xianxia didn't have any intention of making things difficult for them. Moreover, he only trapped them within a formation and didn't arouse the intention to kill. But both of them became worried for Xianxia once again. With an extremely terrifying fellow like Xianxia glaring with hostility from the side, Xianxia was probably in danger. At this moment, the battle beneath the sky had unfolded once more. The crowd of geniuses avoided him and didn't move forward. But how could Xianxia possibly stop just like this? Conversely, he started to take the initiative to attack. He held the sacred weapon of the Yazi clan, the bloody sword, in his hand while moving with the chaotic 9 steps annihilation, and coupled with the movement speed of the wings of disruption that was swift like a bolt of lightning, it caused him to seem like a fiend god that wandered about within space while slaughtering living beings and coloring the sky red. Some experts were terrified to the point their souls almost left their bodies when they saw this, and they didn't dare hesitate any longer to turn around and flee in panic like a stray dog while wishing for nothing more than for their parents to have given birth to them with more limbs. After all, no matter how great a fortune was, one needed to be alive to enjoy it. The scales seemed to have started to slightly tilt towards Xianxia. Everyone, we must persist. Since the battle started until now, this thief has already exhausted an enormous amount of physical strength, and we must not allow him to replenish his true essence. Otherwise, all the hard work from before would be in vain. Feng Jianbai shouted at the top of his voice. Earlier, he was terrified by Xianxia's shocking combat strength to the point his scalp went numb as well, and his heart shivered without end. But when he saw the entire crowd of experts faintly showed signs of retreating and fleeing in defeat, he was instantly unable to sit still, and he started to roar continuously and boost the morale of everyone. We're only a step away from killing this thief. If we give up now, then it would be equivalent to giving up an enormous fortune. Fortune comes from danger, and there's no such thing as obtaining something without paying a price in this world. Now, the opportunity is right before your eyes. Could it be that everyone wants to watch helplessly and give up just like this? That's 5 grand Dao fragments. Needless to say, Feng Jianbai was indeed a figure that was extremely skilled in fanning the flames. A mere few sentences of his had quickly calmed the minds of those experts. No matter how formidable Xianxia is, his physical strength is limited in the end. So long as he's pressured to the point of being unable to consume spirit pills to replenish his true essence, then wouldn't he be exhausted to death in the end? Not to mention those experts that perished previously had utilized their lives to pave a path for them. No matter how formidable Xianxia was, he was only at the nether transformation realm, and he'd surely exhausted an enormous amount of true essence already. If they were to give up at this moment, it would be a great pity indeed. When they thought up to here, those experts that originally intended to flee didn't flee any longer, and those that hadn't made a move yet decided to seize this opportunity to make a move, causing the situation to return to what it was before this. Kill! We'll put our lives on the line for the sake of the grand Tao fragments. First come, first serve. Those that a step slower won't even get any scraps. All the experts roared furiously before charging forward once again. All of them seethed with killing intent and had excited expression, and it seemed as if Xianxia was about to perish and those grand Tao fragments would be within easy reach as well. Humans die in the pursuit for wealth while birds die in the pursuit for food. These words were really a true saying that's indisputable since ancient times, and it was accurate anywhere in the world. Feng Jianbai heaved a sigh of relief in his heart upon seeing this scene, and a wisp of a complacent smile appeared on the corners of his mouth once again. If they're unable to kill Xianxia even like this, then there's no justice in this world. After all, an entire 100+ experts from the various powers had died miserably earlier. Moreover, all these experts that had died miserably were absolutely not ordinary figures. All of them were great cultivators at the nether transformation realm, and their strength was sufficient to establish a sect in the outside world. How could such a shocking sacrifice have not caused any consumption to Xianxia? Xianxia was extremely composed and calm instead, and he was indifferent and fearless. Perhaps he'd utterly not taken Feng Jianbai's actions of instigating everyone and their reactions seriously. Using numbers to exhaust him to death? That was simply laughable. After all, the dark parasol sapling with his body was gushing out immortal energy like tidewater at every single moment, and it was replenishing his true essence that was being consumed without end. With such a divine object in hand, how could his true essence possibly dry up and cause him to be exhausted to death? Feng Jianbai is truly atrocious. Even though Xianxia didn't care, it didn't represent that he would let Feng Jianbai off. In the next moment, his gaze had already locked onto the ladder before charging towards him. At the side of the enormous mountain was almost an entire 1,000 experts from the various powers, and even though Xianxia charged and slaughtered repeatedly, he'd only slaughtered over 100 of his enemies. After all these experts had cultivations at the nether transformation realm, and they possessed formidable strengths that ordinary people couldn't compare to. If news of Xianxia being capable to achieve such an accomplishment were to be spread, it would be sufficient to shock the world. A lone person killing over 100 cultivators at the same realm amidst an army. Such a ferocious deed was something very few people in the entire dark reverie were capable of accomplishing. Rumble. The battle continued. The glow of blood shot through the sky as rays of lights roiled like the tide, and the horrifying and terrifying sounds of battle and collision were like the terrifying sound of the earth collapsing or a volcano erupting. Xianxia rampaged through within the battle while the bloody sword shot out like bolts of lightning. Every single strike seemed capable of moving the gods as it reaped life after life, and it was ferocious, powerful, swift like a bolt of lightning, and terrifying to the extreme. Blood dyed his clothes and hair red, causing him to be like a god of devils that trampled on the world and everything within it with an imposing aura, and everywhere the blade of his sword went, all obstacles before him would be swept away. Magic treasure after magic treasure were slashed apart by him. Tao art after Tao art was eliminated by him, and enemy after enemy was killed amidst shrill cries and transformed into severed limbs that fell from the sky and tainted the heavens red while soaking the entire world with blood. The scene seemed like the world had transformed into purgatory. Most astonishing of it all was that along with the gradual passage of time, his peerlessly ferocious imposing aura actually didn't weaken in the slightest, and he became even more courageous as the battle progressed and rose steadily in might. It seemed as if he was a war god that would never be exhausted, and he shocked everyone present. How could this be possible? Since the beginning of the battle until now, he has actually not shown the slightest signs of exhaustion. How could such a freak exist in this world? Feng Jianbai's pupils dilated as the complacency from before had instantly been replaced by an indescribable feeling of horror, while the corners of his mouth couldn't help but shiver. He was unable to imagine how they were still incapable of doing anything to Xianxia under such a situation. As a cultivator at the Nether Transformation realm as well, he knew extremely clearly about exactly how great the consumption of true essence was when exerting multiplied combat strength. No matter how solid and vast a person's black hole world was, there would be a time that it dried up, unless one consumed spirit pills to replenish one's true essence. But he'd clearly seen that from the beginning until the end. She didn't have the chance to consume a spirit pill. How could he possibly be able to persist until now? This fellow has actually grown to such a terrifying extent? Feng Jianbai muttered. He felt he was simply like a piece of trash when compared to Xianxia and was unable to chase up to Xianxia's footsteps any longer. But in the next moment, he woke up from his disordered thoughts, because he saw that Xianxia had actually charged towards him, and that icy cold and emotionless gaze terrified him to the point his soul almost left his body. So how could he dare to continue being lost in thought? He fled repeatedly and dodged to the back of the crows as he was deeply afraid of being locked onto by Xianxia, because he didn't have the slightest will to fight when facing this brutal god of slaughter. Everyone, you must persist. Feng Jianbai howled loudly once more. However, before he could finish speaking, he noticed to his shock that Xianxia had actually appeared abruptly before him. Slap! Xianxia's expression was icy cold as he formed an ethereal hand that roiled with talisman markings and seemed to be material, and it emitted a blazing glow as it slapped Feng Jianbai flying. In just a single strike, Xianxia had struck Feng Jianbai to the point blood sprayed from his nose and mouth, while countless bones broke all over his body, and he spasmed ceaselessly and emitted shrill cries like a dead dog. After all, he'd just arrived at the Dark Reverie half a year ago like Xianxia and had joined one of the 10 great immortal sects, the Truth Embrace sect. He'd just advanced to the Nether Transformation realm and was even inferior to Lung Qiu, Du Xian, and the others, so how could he possibly be a match for Xianxia? How could this be possible? Feng Jianbai was slapped to the point his head droned while stars danced before his eyes, and he still didn't dare believe the scene before him. When he looked towards the surroundings out of the corner of his eyes, he instantly seemed as if he was struck by lightning. It turned out that since an unknown period in time, those experts that came from the various powers had already fled towards all direction as their will to fight had been completely crushed beneath Xianxia's unmovable imposing aura, and there was actually no one that dared come forward and offend him again. Even if they didn't flee, all of them had avoided to the side and didn't dare to charge forward like before. After all, the combat strength Xianxia revealed was too terrifying. So how could they dare continue risking their lives? These bastards. They're simply a useless and disorderly mob. Feng Jianbai was angered to the point his eyes almost split apart, and he was in complete despair. Unfortunately, he'd forgotten that he wasn't a commander that commanded the entire army, and he was only a despicable fellow that fanned the flames from the shadows. Not to mention all those experts were from the various powers of the Dark Reverie. Every single one of them was arrogant, unruly, and had their own thoughts, so how could they possibly listen to his orders? So blaming others at a time like this was simply laughable to the extreme. Xianxia, you can't kill me. I'm a seed disciple of the Truth Embrace sect now. Could it be that you want to go against the Truth Embrace sect? Do you want your 9 Radiant Sword sect to go to war with my Truth Embrace sect? When he saw Xianxia walking over once again, Feng Jianbai was terrified to the point his entire body trembled, and he howled repeatedly. Not to mention, my senior brother Taoist Crimson Sun is within the Dark Parasol's abyss now, so you won't be able to live for long if you kill me. Go to war? Aren't you thinking too highly of yourself? I even dared to kill the members of the Yazi clan, so how the fuck can you compare? Xianxia took a step forward with an icy cold and indifferent expression before raising his hand to slap Feng Jianbai, and it struck him to the point his teeth fell out while blood sprayed from all the aperture on his face, causing his face to be in a mangled and horrifying state. You're courting death. No one in the Dark Reverie can allow a devil like you to continue existing. Feng Jianbai let out a shrill and miserable cry and was terrified to the point his entire body started trembling. How laughable! Only you're allowed to kill, yet others aren't allowed to kill you. She shook his head while speaking with a voice that was filled with disdain, and he already couldn't be bothered to waste his breath. So he lifted the bloody sword up before slashing it down. The hearts of the experts from the various powers that hadn't fled yet trembled when they saw this scene. This fellow Xianxia is simply too cold. His strength is formidable and he doesn't care about any threats. How terrible would he be once he grows? Swoosh! However, right at the instant she made a move, a wisp of a piercingly cold and extremely ghastly killing intent suddenly exploded out from behind him. In merely an instant, Xianxia's field of vision was covered in a white glow and a terrifying aura of danger that struck directly at his heart, and it felt as if a blade was pressed on his back. This surprise attack could be said to be cunning and ruthless to the extreme, and it just happened to seize the instant she made a move to kill Feng Jianbai. If it was an ordinary person, the person would probably be utterly incapable of dodging and could only wait helplessly for death to arrive. Hiss! That's... Everyone was shocked and gasped. From their point of view, they just happened to be able to see an imperceptible figure seem to have appeared out of thin air behind Xianxia before stabbing with his sword. Everyone felt horrified because an assassination like this was simply too terrifying. It was without completely traceless and seemed as if the person was already concealed there since before and had appeared silently. If it was any one of them, they would be utterly incapable of avoiding this attack. You finally can't refrain yourself from making a move? I've been waiting for a very long time. However, what caused everyone to be even more shocked was that Xianxia seemed as if he'd known this scene would occur long ago. At practically the instant the surprise attack appeared, he'd swiftly turned around and shot out explosively while the bloody sword swept out horizontally. Bang! Both attacks collided and erupted with a dazzling brilliance and a bang that shook the 9 heavens, and it pierced the eardrums of everyone to the point of being on the verge of splitting apart. Stomp! 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 That figure that appeared abruptly was slashed by Xianxia's horizontal sword strike to the point of moving back without end. Every single step back he took caused even space to be crushed beneath him, and it was obvious how violent that energy he faced was. The figure retreated continuously for over 30 m in distance before stopping. At this moment, everyone had already seen the appearance of the figure clearly. A thin figure, a jet black mask, and a pair of violet eyes that were suffused with an evil sheen. Shroud, the top nether transformation realm assassin. It's actually him. Supposedly, his assassination technique can be ranked in the top 10 within the entire Dark Reverie, and he has never failed. He's an extremely formidable and mysterious existence. My God, even a figure like Shroud has actually failed. Merely this is sufficient to make Xianxia renowned in the world. Everyone was shocked when they recognized the identity of the assassin, and every single one of them revealed expressions of disbelief. They seemed to have never imagined that such a mysterious figure would actually make an appearance here. Moreover, this figure would actually fail an assassination before their very eyes. Swoosh! Shroud was slightly stunned as well from his failure, and then his figure swiftly became imperceptible and erupted with strands of jet black light as he suddenly turned to leave. But Xianxia was long since prepared. A vertical eye opened up at the center of his forehead and erupted with a strand of the light of eradication, and it directly sealed up the area of space that Shroud stood in. The light of eradication eradicated all techniques. It was capable of destroying the world and confining one's enemies imperceptibly, and it was even possessed lethal force that wasn't present in the Grand Confinement Dao art. When cultivated to the limit, a strand of light was sufficient to sweep through a myriad of Dao arts and divine abilities before obliterating everything in the world into nothingness. The figure of Shroud who intended to leave instantly froze on the spot like a fish that was frozen in ice or an insect that was stuck on a spider's web, and he struggled violently. You've repeatedly struck surprise attacks against me. Could it be that you think I'm incapable? Xianxia's gaze was like a bolt of lightning that coldly locked onto this despicable fellow that had surprise attacked him twice while the flames of rage in his heart rose slowly. In the sea of clouds on the other day he was caught off guard and was almost killed by the surprise attack, and he was absolutely hanging by a thread. Such an experience caused him to be unwilling to experience it a second time. So since he arrived here and decided to do battle, he'd been watching the surroundings with the eye of divine truth. Sure enough, he noticed this sneaky bastard. Moreover, when he wanted to kill Feng Jianbai earlier, he'd intentionally delayed for such a long time just for the sake of creating a false impression and using it to draw out this assassin that was skilled in moving about in the darkness. Shroud puckered his lips without speaking. Even if he was confined, he was still composed to the extreme and exerted his entire cultivation to struggle violently with the intention of breaking through the shackles and escaping. Explode! Xianxia's expression was icy cold and covered in killing intent as he lightly spat out a single word. Bang! The space that Shroud stood on exploded with a bang and transformed into an expanse of chaotic flows of space. It instantly sliced countless terrifying injuries onto Shroud's body, causing him to drip with blood. But Shroud was extremely formidable as well. Even though he'd suffered such a heavy injury, he was still calm and resolute to the extreme. At the instant he escaped the confinement, he soared up right away, and he transformed into a wisp of an imperceptible shadow and intended to charge into the sky. Thinking of leaving? Leave your life behind. Xianxia's eyes focused. He had no choice but to admit that this fellow was really formidable, and if it was an ordinary person, the person would have been killed by that attack of his a long time ago. Swoosh! Even though he thought like this in his heart, his movements weren't slow in the slightest, and the wings of disruption flapped. In the next moment, he'd already appeared behind Shroud before another strand of the light of eradication shot out from his vertical eye while the bloody sword in his hand spun and slashed out at the same time. However, it was at this moment that an unexpected event occurred once again. An enormous palm tore through the sky while blotting out the heavens and the sun, and its fingers were exceedingly enormous and had turned jet black in color. They seemed like a black color mountain that was shaped like a palm, and they lay across Xianxia's path before grabbing down towards him. A palm that blotted out the sky appeared out of thin air. This scene was extremely shocking. It was like a great devil had descended into the world as jet black clouds roiled and emitted a boundless devilish glow, and the pressure and vast aura it emitted was truly horrifying. Rumble. Being obstructed by this caused all of Xianxia's attacks to strike onto this hand, and it was like two volcanoes that had collided with each other. The collision emitted rumbling that shook the heavens and the earth while emitting a myriad of rays of divine light, and the aftershocks swept out towards the surroundings, causing space to be torn apart and rocks to be shattered. Everyone in the surroundings dodged repeatedly while they revealed extremely astonished expressions. Ha ha ha! Amazing! I never imagined that the 9 Radiant Sword sect actually possessed a figure like you, Xianxia. You're indeed a rare top figure, and I'll have a good spar with you when we meet next. A wave of loud laughter sounded out like the roar of a dragon, and it shook the surroundings while emitting a peerlessly arrogant and overbearing aura. After that, everyone noticed a tall and dignified figure flashing out while carrying a shocking jet black light, and the figure tore through the sky before swiftly vanishing without a trace. The Nether Spring Devil Sect's Qiu Jun. I never imagined that it would actually be him who made a move. He really does deserve to be the sacred disciple of the devil sect that possesses the 1,000 Severance devil body. Merely a single strike of his revealed such a boundlessly elegant demeanor. Qiu Jun? Could it be that it was he who instructed the assassin, Shroud, to assassinate Xianxia? Everyone recognized Qiu Jun and were extremely shocked in their hearts because this was a formidable figure of the devil sect that was like the sun in the midday sky, and he'd actually made an appearance here. Moreover, at this moment, the clouds of smoke in the sky had dispersed, and Xianxia's tall figure had once again appeared within everyone's fields of vision. So it turns out that the assassin and this fellow are actually together. But why would they want to go against me? It's absolutely impossible for it to be for the sake of the Grand Tao fragments. After all, Shroud had already tried to assassinate me once before I arrived at the Dark Parasol's abyss, and at that time, I hadn't obtained a single Grand Tao fragment yet. Xianxia frowned as he looked towards the direction Qiu Jun vanished, and he knew that even if he pursued now, he would probably be unable to catch up. What? You want to flee as well? Xianxia turned around abruptly to gaze towards Feng Jianbai who was at the side. This fellow intended to seize this opportunity to flee, and when Xianxia saw this, he directly slashed out with his sword, causing a rain of blood to spray out as he completely ended Feng Jianbai's life. After that, Xianxia swept the surroundings with his gaze, and there was actually not a single person amongst the few hundred experts of the various powers that dared look him in the eye. Obviously, the will of these experts had already been awed by his might, and they didn't dare make any rash movements for now at least. In next to no time, Xianxia's gaze descended onto the area before the enormous mountain. At that place, Long Jinbei and Enwei were trapped by the 8-illusion immortal cage. On a rock at the side from them was a figure that sat cross-legged atop it. His back was ramrod straight, his shoulders wide, and he remained there without moving like a mountain. He seemed as if he'd fused with the heavens and the earth, and his aura was unique and formidable. Swoosh! That figure suddenly opened its eyes upon noticing Xianxia's gaze, and it erupted with strands of blazing glows of fire that interweaved together and formed numerous strange phenomena. Yan Shisan. Xianxia's eyes focused as he discerned the uniqueness of this person's physique. It seemed as if it was constructed from fiery jade, causing him to be like a god that innately controlled the element of fire and was extremely oppressive. This was Firestar body, a phenomenon that was inborn. According to rumor, since the moment of birth, a person that possessed this physique would have grasped the grand Tao of fire and possess an extremely intimate connection with the myriad of flames in the heavens and the earth. When cultivated to the limit, the possessor of the physique was even capable of communicating with the energy of fire within nature itself to be of use to himself, and it was peerlessly formidable. Obviously, one that possessed such a physique was surely that genius from the Heavenflow Tao sect who was similarly the most renowned madman in the 10 great immortal sects that yearned madly for battle. I've been waiting for you for a very long time. Yan Shisan stood up. He was tall and handsome, and every single move he made was filled with an arrogant and overbearing aura that drew the attention of everyone. Some people were capable of making others have a deep impression of them with a single glance, and it caused others to feel they were extraordinary and would soar into the sky sooner or later. Obviously, Yan Shisan was such a person. Your strength from before was already sufficient to be a match for me. Now, so long as you're able to defeat me, you can freely take these two people away. Otherwise, leave your life behind. He raised his hand to point towards Enwei and Long Zhenbei, who were trapped within the 8-illusion immortal cage, as he spoke indifferently. As he spoke, he gave his body a long stretch. Instantly, he seemed to have become a different person. His long hair fluttered about while his flaming eyes seemed like bolts of fiery lightning, and his thin and imposing physique surged with monstrous battle intent. He was like a blazing sun that was willful, arrogant, and peerlessly overbearing. This was the true Yan Shisan, one that was mad for battle. Besides battle, there wasn't anything in the world that was capable of drawing his attention. Especially when he encountered an opponent that moved him, he would seem as if he'd obtained a supreme treasure in the world, and his entire bearing would become completely different. He really is formidable. I heard this madman, Yan Shisan, had already grasped the ability to multiply his combat strength by 6 times a long time ago, and he possesses precious treasures. He's absolutely a top existence amongst his peers in the Heavenflow Tao sect. Exactly. But the most important is his combat experience that's abundant to the extreme, because he has experienced countless horrifying battles to attain his current accomplishments. She can be proud of himself for being able to be chosen as an opponent by this world-renowned madman. After all, an ordinary person would be utterly incapable of entering Yan Shisan's eyes. Everyone exclaimed with admiration. The reason they hadn't left for so long was because they'd placed hope on Yan Shisan, and they felt his strength was sufficient to turn around the situation and annihilate Xianxia. If this were to happen, then they could seize the opportunity to have a share, so why not? On the other hand, Long Jinbei and Enwei couldn't help but frown as a wisp of worry gushed onto their faces. This madman Yan Shisan was too formidable, and was able to casually take out 8 quasi-immortal artifact grade flags to form the 8-illusion immortal cage that trapped both of them. It wasn't difficult to imagine that Yan Shisan had utterly no lack of formidable treasures. It was practically impossible to find a match amongst those of the same cultivation for such a figure that yearned madly for battle and possessed precious treasures. And once Xianxia were to go against him, it was impossible to determine the outcome. After all, Xianxia had already been fighting with the crowd of geniuses for a long time earlier, whereas Xianxia had been building up his strength since the beginning. When the two of them were compared, Xianxia would probably be inferior just in terms of their current states. When they thought like this, their hearts grew heavier, and they became even more worried for Xianxia. "You took my companions hostage just for the sake of fighting me?" Xianxia's expression was calm while his imposing aura was like bottomless abyss, and his eyes flickered with profound talisman markings as he stared at Xianxia. If Xianxia challenged him to battle fairly, then perhaps he would respect Xianxia slightly. But unfortunately, Xianxia had used the lives of Anwei and Long Jinbei to threaten him, and this caused him to detest Xianxia. "No, it's for the sake of annihilating you." Xianxia shook his head while his expression remained unchanged, and his battle intent surged, causing a fiery glow to surge as his imposing aura became even more oppressive. The reply to his words was a sword strike from Xianxia. An expanse of a bloody sea surged out while roiling with talisman markings of slaughter, and it was like a vast and mighty tempestuous storm that dyed the sky blood red. At this moment, there was no need for any more words. Xianxia used actions to tell Xianxia that he similarly desired to annihilate Xianxia, and he even wasn't willing to speak further. "Bring it on!" Xianxia roared like a thunderclap that exploded out in the 9 heavens. Expanses of fiery glows shot out, and it pierced the eyes of everyone to the point it ached while he stretched out his hand and pushed forward. The skin on this palm was extremely delicate, and its striations were clear and smooth as if made from silk. It was an entire 500 kilometers in size, completely crystalline, white, and soft like jade. Moreover, a kingdom of flames actually seemed to have been formed within the palm, and countless living beings were living within the kingdom, causing it to be extremely mysterious and horrifying. Flame World Palm. Many people gasped. This was a peak-grade Dao art that only apex experts were capable of executing. Its requirements towards one's cultivation was extremely harsh, and it was one of the ultimate inheritances of the Heaven Flow Dao sect. At this moment, even Anwei and Long Jinbei felt their scalps go slightly numb as their faces turned a little bit pale. The might of this palm strike from Xianxia caused them to feel that it was difficult to resist. Rumble. The palm stretched over and continued extending forward after it shattered the bloody sword strikes, and it intended to capture Xianxia, trap Xianxia within the mysterious world of fire, and completely refine him. Xianxia held the bloody sword in his hand while the wings of disruption flapped swiftly, and it erupted with boundless profound disruption divine light with the intention of slashing apart the heavens and the earth and shattering the enormous hand that blotted out the sky while striking towards him. "Thinking of running? What a clown!" Xianxia shouted coldly. "OM!" The heavens and the earth trembled as his 5 fingers grew explosively. Every single finger was coiled with a glow of flames and flickered with lava or divine flames, and they seemed like 5 divine pillars that were extremely thick and large. They pressed down before slowly closing together with the intention of completely confining Xianxia. Xianxia's wings of disruption flickered as he leaped about repeatedly. But the enormous hand was expanding as well and following him like a shadow, and it constantly enveloped him as if it had completely locked down the surroundings and transformed it into a world of flames. At the same time, strands of divine flames appeared between the fingers of the palm, and they rumbled as they blazed. The flames raged and leaped about as they surged around the 5 enormous fingers, causing them to seem unrestrained and terrifying. When had everyone seen such a scene and such a terrifying Dao art? A vast world of flames developed within the palm was simply something that had attained an unbelievable level amongst Dao arts. Bang! Xianxia's bloody sword rose into the sky and charged into the heavens. It erupted with boundless killing intent and flowed with sword insight as it transformed into countless characters with the intention of breaking apart the world of flames with this palm and utilizing this to escape. However, Xianxia was really too formidable. He'd been cultivating this peak-grade Dao art, Flame World Palm, for a very long time, and it had already attained a state of perfection. The 5 enormous fingers that were like divine pillars tempered by flames converged together, and they exploded out with surging streams of fire that didn't just eliminate all Xianxia's attacks. They actually instantly drowned Xianxia within them amidst a wave of rumbling. You only possess 5 times combat strength, and it's utterly not worth mentioning before my 7 times combat strength. Moreover, I've used more than 30 years on the Flame World Palm, so even though you've grasped numerous peak-grade Dao arts, none of them have attained a state of perfection. How can you fight me? Accept refinement. Xianxia shouted out explosively as the flaming glow around his body surged, and he seemed like a god of flames. His 5 fingers erupted with boundless divine flames before all of them pressed down towards Xianxia, who was at the center of the palm, and it intended to completely transform him into ashes. Everyone was horrified. Not to mention anything else, merely this type of monstrous might of his Dao art caused them to be astounded. And if they entered into the hand, they would surely die without a doubt, and not even a scrap of them would remain. Even more shocking to them was that Xianxia, who swept through all obstacles before him and killed everyone before him like an invincible war god, had actually been completely suppressed at the instant he started fighting with Xianxia. This had simply exceeded all their expectations. Xianxia, within the 8 illusion immortal cage, Anwei and Long Jinbei exclaimed with shock in unison, and they didn't dare believe that Xianxia would actually be suppressed so quickly by Xianxia, causing their hearts to rise to their throats, while they felt a mix of extreme fury and worry.